is. Okay.
Okay, well, I'll start then. Let's give it a sec. We still got like 2 minutes.
You got the introduction.
Okay. And then I gotta get the recording going again and share all that.
Oh, you work with Mark, huh?
Mark Swanson, yes, my business partner.
Okay.
Well, I actually work with 2 Mark Swansons. There's a bunch of them in the Twin Cities. All of them are in quality.
Small world.
Yes. Live.
So everybody, my name is Tim Peterson. I'm the chair of the Minnesota ASQ for this year for 2024. Minnesota ASQ kind of sponsors Biomedical Consortium, which is put on this meeting. Biomedical Consortium is a group of individuals that work with us as far as, and they put together webinars, and they focus mostly on biomedical, biological and medical and med device issues in quality. They actually have 2 webinars coming up. They've got one on the 18th of September, which is production and quality system software and how to do a validation of that stuff. Then they got another one, which is going to be a workshop, and 3 people are going to be kind of handing off. The first one is September 18th, right? Production and quality system software, a risk-based approach to validation. The other one is October 29th. They're sponsoring Excellence in Quality Workshop, and there's going to be 3 experts, right off the top of my head, Jackie Thorfinn and Karen Pfeiffer, and there's a 3rd. And they're going to be discussing the excellence in quality, risk-based CAPA, and creating a culture of quality within your organization. So they're going to do that discussion. For logistics, we're going to have lunch, I believe, right at about 12. We'll have some sandwiches brought in, and we'll break at that time. I can see you got your name cards, and just put the name on there, what you want Steve to call you. Steve runs a very, very interactive seminar, and he really counts on people asking questions, and that's so that it more pertains to what it is that you guys need. So anytime, ask questions. If you need to make a phone call, please step out. Otherwise, no rules in here. You want to introduce yourself, and I'll be done.
Yeah, so morning, everybody. Morning. Gets the energy level going here. That goes for you guys online as well. I'm going to try not to forget you. I will try to look at the camera once in a while, so it looks like I'm looking at you. I want to check for people online. Is the sound good for you? You want to give me a thumbs up? James, good. I can see you. Great. You don't have to keep your cameras on. Just quick logistics before I introduce myself. I like to take questions as we go. I think it's better if the question is asked at the point we're discussing a topic. We'll certainly leave time at the end of the section, at the end of the workshop, to ask follow-on questions. But if something's in your head, it's probably in somebody else's head. So go ahead and just open your mic if you're online, or just raise your hand here, and we'll answer it right away. It is helpful if you're going to ask a question online if you turn your camera on then, just so we get body language to understand. If it's an angry question, is it a happy question? You're totally confused. Am I answering okay? And those kind of things. All right, so that'll be on the right screen, right? There we go. All right, so this is me. So I'm Steve Gompertz. I've been in the medtech arena for over 30 years now, plus an additional 7 years in the computer industry before that. So I've had a number of trips around the sun at this point. I've done a lot of different things in the industry, but most of that, about 2/3 of my time in medtech, has been in quality-related roles. Everything from individual contributor roles up through being a worldwide head of quality for a company. I have a background also in project management, engineering automation. That was kind of where I came out of the computer industry, was as an expert in CAD/CAM systems, computer-aided engineering. I do audits, and I was the head of quality for a software as a med device. So that adds some uniqueness to the background as well. I'm also an instructor here at St. Cloud State University. This is our graduate center. I help them develop a master's degree program in med tech quality. We also have programs in regulatory and in clinical as well, part of that program. And I teach 4 of the courses. I teach quality systems, quality and regulatory fundamentals, risk management, and design controls. And those courses can be taken individually or as a certificate if you don't want to go for the full master's. So there's my advertising for St. Cloud. We paid for the room. There we go. We're good there. By education, I'm a mechanical engineer. I have never had that job, which confused my mother up until the day she died. What did she pay for it if I never, in her mind, I never actually used the degree. In my mind, it was just good training and prepared me to do any kind of engineering or technical work. And then I've got a bunch of certifications, which helps me do this kind of thing and leverage that. There's my email contact and my LinkedIn. I encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll connect with anybody, and I like getting emails. If you think of a question afterwards, I'm always happy to answer again. And me and my company, QRx Partners, we're a consulting company. We post a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, so it's good to follow QRx Partners as well, because we put something out every day. Sometimes it's just funny stuff, but sometimes it's really useful stuff. Like tomorrow, we'll be putting out our weekly inadequate response posting, where we take a warning letter, break it down a bit, maybe point some fingers occasionally. We try not to shame, try to point out what you should have been doing differently, but it's one of our more popular postings there. So these days, like I said, I'm a consultant. We focus on small to medium companies, particularly startups in the medtech space, with both, as the name would imply, both quality and regulatory requirements. And that's both for mainly for med device, but we have quite a few pharma and combination device customers as well. All right, so that's me. Let's learn about you guys. So we'll do the quick go around the room and online to find out who everybody is. So we'll start in the room, but just what's your name? What do you do for work? And then what kind of challenges have you encountered trying to implement change? I know some of you provided some of that during your registration. I did look at those comments. And then just share your favorite movie, food, child, whichever, whatever comes to mind to round you out here. So we're going to start actually in the back of the room and start with Jason.
Hi, my name is Jason Zavelli. I am a quality systems coordinator for a small startup in Edina that does a medical device for veterinary animals, horses and dogs and cats. Greatest challenge right now is implementing a full quality system. And there's basically me and one other person who's regulatory quality. So getting the entire company of 30 people to buy in. That's why I thought the seminar would be great. I'll say my favorite hobby, and it's Legos. So.
Yeah, I mean, in the veterinary space, you have a number of challenges. If you said you were a startup just in the human device, the human pharma, it's a little bit easier because there's this thing called FDA that you have to comply with. On the veterinary side, if you're not familiar with veterinary regulations, there's not a lot of requirements there.
But we're trying to build it out
right, you want to do the right thing, and that's sort of like they say you're on your best behavior and don't get in trouble, because then we'll pay you, but otherwise, yeah, you don't have to register, you don't have to get approvals. It's a little weird on the veterinary side. So yeah, being a Guerilla might be a way to go for you and your organization. Great.
I'm Sherry Mockler. I'm a senior quality systems specialist at Prebiotics. So it's our one commercial product is a combo device. My background is mostly in pharma. Some of my biggest challenges have been that I worked in R&D for several years before transitioning to quality. And when I joined Prebiotics, they didn't really have a good pathway for R&D. So as we're going into phase 1, I'm struggling to get my quality director on board with some of the flexibility that R&D needs to be compliant, but also to still have the flexibility to do what they need to do to make the changes. And it's very difficult for somebody who hasn't worked in R&D or isn't comfortable in that space trying to convince them what we need to do and what the right thing is. My favorite hobby is traveling. I've been to all 7 continents, and that's my passion behind quality, of course.
Of course. All right, we'll go forward and we'll go to Helen.
Okay, yeah, I'm Helen Phillips. I work for Plymouth Logistics. We are not in the biomedical industry. We are logistics. I previously worked in manufacturing. It's the first time I worked in a kind of service industry. So that's been one of the challenges is making that change. One of the other challenges, and I think Scott will say the same thing to me, is we do get a lot of resistance to change. We're a small company. There are people who've been doing things the same way for a long time.
Yep.
Sometimes they don't even want to hear what the change is before saying no.
Got it, yep, understand.
Um,
And just, so you know, I mean, my background's obviously from the med tech space and my examples will be, but this applies anywhere.
I'm also a failed mechanical engineer, because that's where all my degree was in, and I've never done mechanical engineering, like straight to
Excellent.
quality. For favorite things, I'm just gonna say that, because my husband stopped at the, Minnesota's biggest candy store on the weekend, and brought me home Cadbury's chocolate, so we'll go with that.
Okay.
My favorite chocolate.
Nice, thank you.
I'm,
Scott?
I'm Scott Elvin. I also work at Malark Logistics. I'm in charge of the IT department. The challenges, yes, Helen mentioned resistance to change. But I also have a challenge in my own department with the whole speed versus quality thing, you know,
Sure.
you sacrifice one or the other. And we have people that like to move fast that don't care about the quality side of it and just say, well, for fast, we can just go loop back and fix that part of it.
Sure.
So that's a balance we're trying to.
You'll never time to do it right, always time to do it again.
Yes. And actually share that I was gonna mention travel is my favorite thing as well. I don't know how many countries I've been to, 30, 35, I think, something like that, so, right.
Thank you. Tim, you already introduced yourself, or did you want to say something more? No. Then we'll go with Adriana.
Sure, yeah. My name is Adriana. I work as a quality assurance specialist for Dynamica. We're a small clinical stage biopharmaceutical company. I think our biggest challenges as related to quality is just getting people to use our EQMS. It's super simple to use. We tried to pick one that's very simple and just getting people to sign on and do their trainings and let any kind of interaction with it has been a bit of a struggle. And let's go with my favorite child, it's my cat Rolo.
You had me worried there, it's like, oh, this is being recorded.
He's an only cat child.
Thank you.
I'm
What's,
Alexis Sundin. I work as a quality lead at Tollmaster. We build trailers and we also build snow plows. So all the DOT snow plows that you typically see everywhere. Our challenges, we encounter a lot of pushback. A lot of people have been there for 20+ years. Getting them to change things, we're implementing processes. We don't have a system whatsoever, so we're building all of that from scratch. My favorite hobby is traveling, and I also like to thrift, so I'm a big thrifter.
great, thank you. Is it Andy?
Yes, Eddie Paul, materials and compliance engineer. Right now I'm in between positions. I'm looking to get into biotech, my background mostly in defense and electronics industry. For challenges, mostly it's been pushback from like new product development, a little bit of what you said for lots of time to fix it later, and you know, we get things done and out the door and being
Yeah, R&D is often a challenging space. They're used to a lot of freedom and moving quickly. And because we have to iterate and we have to be creative and quality stuff can come later. It's a challenge.
And I'm sort of a motorhead. I've been to a couple of Steve's lectures. Really, it's an entertaining event, and I know he's a little bit of a motorhead too. He's got quite a Hellcat.
Thank you. Great. Masan, you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Mesan Ramadan. I'm a quality engineer in medical device, but right now I'm in job transition. And the challenge that I face when I use work is the resistance of the management. When they saw you as you don't have the power to bring the change, they resist or they think the change will not slow down their production, they don't wanna get working, so at least listen to you, what you bring, what you wanna improve. That's the challenge we face. My favorite is movie. I don't have any particular one. By the way, I have my master's degree in medical technology quality here. It's a very good program, and I encourage everybody to take that step to further the knowledge. It's a very good program. I can testify.
Yeah, I was gonna point out, my son is one of our graduates. He's also a really sharp guy, and so we need a quality engineer. He's the guy. All right, let's go to people online. I'm just gonna call you in the order you're showing up on my screen. So James, that would put you first.
Good morning, everybody. My name is James Shore. I'm very much in the same space as you are. I work in the consulting industry, consulting for medical device in quality, regulatory, and operational excellence. So I get to travel quite a bit like you, and I do inspections as well in the organ transplant and donor recovery process. So very interesting industry as well. The challenges that I encounter, very much like everybody here, is, you're paying for a consultant to come in here and tell you, here are the changes need to be made, and we don't want to make the changes. They don't understand or don't see how to why that change needs to be made. So I try to use the examples of trying to explain to people, if you ever seen the Grand Canyon before, and trying to explain that to somebody that hasn't, it makes it very challenging. So I'm looking for other opportunities, what other people have been doing, to see how we can be more effective. My favorite is my service animal, Oliver. As I start my semi-retirement, I'm learning how to be a dog trainer to help other veterans train their dogs and help them with service animals.
Excellent. Thank you for your service.
Enjoy your freedom while it lasts. That's all I can say.
All right.
Are the slides going to be shared, by the way?
Yes, the slides will be shared. This is being recorded, and the recording will be made available as well.
Great. And the attendees, are we going to be able to connect with each other afterwards by chance?
That I don't know. I don't know.
There's no formal way for us to connect
Say,
with
I'm sure
attendees.
the lists.
If you're interested, as we're doing this, I suppose, contact people. Are you guys interested in sharing contacts with each other?
You can do what I do normally during these things when I'm an attendee, is I just start going through LinkedIn. I see if there's somebody that I think would be interesting to connect with. All right, Annette, we'll go with your introduction.
Yeah, I put it in the chat too. So my name is Annette Johnston. I'm also semi-retired, often working in the med device pharma space on teaching new project managers how to set up projects that have FDA and EMEA compliance, and often complex technical challenges as well. I've just started this business as of like the last couple months. I just started my website.
Oh.
So what do I think is so that's aajprojectconsulting.com. If you find me in LinkedIn, you'll be able to find all of that. So that's what I do for work. The challenges I've encountered in trying to implement change, as I said, is to have the team members changing. The changes I've been working on usually take, they're not a couple months, they're more like a year, in order to get everyone trained and everyone converted. Often it's because of the quality documents involved in a pharma or a medical device space. And I feel like we get momentum and then we have a change in player. So that has been my greatest challenge. And as I said here, my favorite pastime is, in the summer anyway, is kayaking on Lake Michigan. I just went to my first roll class. I think you can learn it in a pool over the winter, and I'm gonna do that.
I was gonna say, a pool and Lake Michigan are not the same.
They are not, and I just went to a lake to learn it, and I was really afraid to put my face underwater in a muddy, weedy lake while I was trying to make sure I stayed in the kayak to flip it around. So they recommended taking the pool class and wearing a scuba mask so that I could see that I'm only 3 feet from the surface, and everything's well lit, the water's clean, to get relaxed, because the key to being able to roll is actually to have your upper body relaxed, and it's just your lower body that's doing the flick, and the rest of your body just follows it. And if you're tense and scared, you're going to just fall out. So
That'd be bad.
that's my next, I guess that's the change I'll be managing in the winter.
All right, David Lemke.
Good morning, David Lemke. I'm the quality manager at a smaller company in Odessa, Florida that makes class 1 carts for nurses and dispensing units, pharmacies, correctional facilities, and then OEMs use the carts to put on like their RF generators and different equipment. Struggles I have is but I feel sometimes that quality is a checkbox that they can use to make sure they can be attractive to the Medtronics and then the J&Js of the world, and is a necessary evil. But the personnel just come across as a cost burden, right? So going through some business troubles last year, laying off different people, so a smaller team than I probably need. Just looking for tactics to come out of this where I can use to communicate that quality is a useful tool and beneficial to the company. Favorite right now, I've got a 11-year-old that just started middle school and 8-year-old that's in 4th grade. We just started school here in Florida, so that's what's going on.
Great, thanks, David. And David's also a product aware.
That's right. Thank you.
Yep. All right, we'll go with Dawn Smith next.
Good morning. My name is Dawn Smith. I am the quality management specialist for a importer of medical devices. We import breast pumps, all the accessories, maternity, compression. My biggest challenge is we do have a couple of suppliers in the United States for our compression garments, but all of our breast pumps come from either China or South Korea. And my biggest challenge is on the quality side is I feel like most of the time, or a lot of the time, especially with one of our suppliers in South Korea, I have to explain to their engineers how to do pretty much everything, how to answer CAPAs, it's just, I could go on and on. I do a lot of traveling to Korea, China, and Taiwan for supplier visits. I'll be leaving October for a 2-week trip out there to help one of our suppliers relocate one of our breast pump production lines to a different facility. Favorites, I do have 2 puppies, 2 Dachshunds, Kaya and Cooper, and they are my babies for sure.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Enrico next.
Hi everyone, I'm Enrico Westenberg. I'm an independent consultant in mostly project management. I've been in medical devices more than 15 years. Challenges I face with implementing change is identifying the ringleader or somebody who may be extremely stubborn, someone mid-major project that can kind of block it all. Favorite, I'd like to travel. Movies as well. I just saw my favorite movie again this weekend, just paying it forward. So especially in this highly polarized election season, it's good to think about that. So.
Great, thank you. All right, and next we'll go with Mahmoud.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mahmoud Darwish. I come from a little bit of a totally different background. I actually work in supply chain. So a year ago, I used to work for Mayo Clinic, the senior supply chain engineering consultant. Before then, I worked on medical devices companies, but more of the supply chain side, so Medtronic, Smith Medical. And lately, I'm working with a Fortune 500 medical supply chain company called Owens & Minor, which we provide which we provide medical devices and medical products to large hospitals. So think of Allina, North Memorial, things of that nature around the city. The reason that I decided to join this session is it is talking about how to influence without authority, which is something that I'm majorly facing right now. So I wanted to get different perspectives on how to approach this. Um, what else? What challenges have you encountered trying to implement change? Uh, the challenge is when you try to face experience with data, some people would like to trying to assert their experience without really looking at data. And what I'm trying to do is to understand how I can package my data, how I can change my tone, how I can approach this to kind of educate and to kind of lead some efforts with data. So that would be my major challenge is how to try to educate, how to try to lead with data rather than trying to uh, go with implementing changes based on just solely experience. What is your favorite? I have a 1-year-old Saint Bernard that is huge. She is 140 pounds, even though she's just a 1-year-old. And she is definitely keeping me up and going every day. So I love her to death for that.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll go with Shaitan.
Hello. My name is Chetan Yukali. I work as a global quality manager. So basically, I work on products, sensors, and systems that are used in the electronic manufacturing and semiconductor manufacturing markets. Challenges. One of the challenges that I'm currently facing is how to effectively manage customer complaints. So we have a global customer base, and I regularly work with the regional teams, be it in Americas, Europe, and Asia. So one of the challenges I'm facing is can our teams, can the ones who are interfacing directly with the customers, can they provide us with actionable data, relevant error logs, error data, so that the team, the design team, manufacturing team can investigate the data and provide effective solutions. So complaint management system or risk management system is something I'm currently working on. That's been one of the biggest challenges so far. Favorite, traveling, be it in a professional capacity or in a personal capacity, I enjoy traveling whenever I get a chance.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, we'll go with Rebecca next.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Andrew. I am the Associate Director of Quality for a startup organization. We are focused on cell therapies and medical devices, so basically pharmaceuticals and devices. The biggest challenge we have is because we're a startup, we have a lot of R&D or university trained folk who don't necessarily understand quality. So it's trying to get them to understand how quality can help them in their job, not hinder them. And my favorite thing would be mountain biking.
Yeah, academia is another one that's kind of like R&D. They're not used to having those constraints. And so it can be very difficult to explain that to them. Good one. All right, next we'll go with Claudio.
Hello, good morning. So my name is Claudio. I am supplier quality engineer at Dell Technologies in Brazil, right? And I've been working here for 9 years, completed last Saturday, which is nice. A great company to work. And let's say the reason why I'm here for this training today is to learn, as the colleagues mentioned, how to influence with the proper authority. As I am dealing with several suppliers in Korea and also China, and some internal teams also in these countries, and I'm facing several roadblocks in terms of product qualification, also roadblocks in terms of technology transfer from Asia to Brazil. And let's say most of the times I need to ask support from my leadership here to influence in ways to speed up the qualification process and technology transfer. So it's been quite difficult because mainly the technology is evolving in a cycle faster than it was in the past. So it's been a challenge. And my favorites, let's say appreciate a lot radio controlled cars, so those small ones. And there is a company in US that's called Traxxas. And I like those cars too much. I have two here in Brazil from my last visits in US, and I have lots of fun with these cars.
Great, great. Thanks for joining us from Brazil. You definitely win the mileage award.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Next, we've got Mercedes.
Good morning. I'm Mercedes Masana. Like many of you, I'm a consultant in the medical device and pharmaceutical industries. And challenges I encounter trying to implement change is, you know, people always associate change with taking more time, and they don't really see the big picture where, you know, it might take time, a little time to implement the change, but in the end, you actually have better processes and do things a little faster. And my favorites, I have lots of favorites, but I'm going to say pickleball. I'm really into pickleball.
Pickleball, okay, great, thank you. And then we have Alyssa.
Hello, I'm a quality engineer at a medical device company. Our primary product is defibrillators. And for challenges, I would say that one of the main things that I struggle with is getting other departments and priorities aligned as far as quality improvements that need to be made. And we kind of have the opposite issue where I want more speed on changes, but the other departments are maybe dragging a little because of resource issues. And my favorite season is fall. I'm located in New England, so I had my first pumpkin yogurt this morning.
Great, thank you. All right, did I miss anybody? I don't think so. All right, great. I'll move this back. James, I have to ask, is that an Old English sheepdog or a doodle?
He's a standard poodle.
Standard poodle, oh, okay. All right.
I was hoping that everybody else was going to post their pictures of their puppies, but start a trend, but I haven't seen it yet.
Quick, just everybody here in the room can see. There we go. All right. Very cute. All right. Great. So I think we heard some common stories in there. We'll get some interesting breadth of experiences and types of companies. But I think you'll all find something useful here today. We're going to touch on a lot of those themes that you brought up. So the game plan for today, we just got through the introductions. I'm going to start off kind of at a high level, talk about what exactly do I mean by guerrilla tactics. We're not taking up weapons here, so I will explain the concept there. Then we'll go into common quality leadership challenges, which should sound a lot like what some of you just said, just to make sure we level set. And then we'll go into some of the techniques that I found useful. My favorite is called hide the vegetables, which is what it sounds like. We'll go into that. We'll talk about measuring and how to do that without creating fear, as it often does. For lunch, we're gonna break quickly to grab lunch, but then we're gonna just continue. We've got a lot of stuff to cover, so we'll eat, you know, while I'm talking. I'll figure out what I'm gonna do about eating while I'm talking. But anyway, maybe I'll give you guys a topic to talk about, so I can grab a couple of bites. We're gonna talk about lean documentation after lunch, and how to rethink your approach to documentation as a way to influence the organization. And then we'll wrap up with, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, very well-known business book. We're gonna turn that around and make it the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Quality Leaders. And talk about how to get the right habits in place that will help you be more effective. And then we'll wrap things up for the day. All right, so yeah, so guerrilla tactics, what are we talking about? Okay, so you look up a definition, you find something along the lines of a person who engages in irregular efforts, typically against larger forces. Okay, so a lot of military kind of terminology here. The tactics I'm referring to is to actions and activities that are performed in a more impromptu way and often without authorization. I heard a lot of that theme in your introductions about trying to get things done without having the formal authority to do it. And that's what we're talking about, is are there ways to just get things done? Not ask for somebody to say yes, right? To just get it done and then have them go, wow, how'd you do that? That's ultimately the goal, is they're impressed by what happened and then they forget about the fact that you didn't ask for them to weigh in on it. But that's what we're talking about when I talk about guerrilla tactics. It's got, you'll see, I'll add in some language throughout about sort of these surreptitious things you can do, and I'll talk about, right, what do we typically see in guerrilla warfare without the violence, right, and the politics and that kind of thing. And politics is a good one to try to avoid. So what we're talking about here is you got to really change your thinking about this. And so there's this great quote by Albert Einstein that, okay, actually it wasn't Einstein who said it, it was Tony Robbins who said it. Actually, it wasn't Tony Robbins who said it was Henry Ford who said it. Actually, it was none of them. So I'm a big fan of watching the sources of quotes out there. People love to quote things on the internet, and usually goes over. But actually, this statement about if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got, came from Dr. Jessie Potter, who was a psychologist. And she said that during a conference speech back in the 1960s. But somebody else who taught me a lot of stuff used to say this a lot, and it's always stuck with me, right? And it's like, yeah, that makes sense. You've got to really step to the side and go, I got to look at this completely differently, right? Because we all know what the definition of insanity is, right? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And that's kind of what Dr. Jessie Potter was getting at here. All right, so some of the common things, if you think about, right, what you see when you hear about guerrilla, let's not use warfare, but guerrilla efforts, right? They're able to move quickly and quietly, right? They usually, like I said, they do things kind of surreptitiously. They don't try to draw attention to themselves, because typically that would then be bad, right? That they understand that they're probably going to get a no for what they're trying to do. So they understand they have to move quietly, and they better do that quickly before anybody realizes what's happened. And we'll talk about that element later. They use unconventional methods, okay? I always like to think back to the ultimate guerrilla warfare, the American Revolutionary War, right? And how, US military was firing from behind trees and walls, and the British were marching in nice straight lines, right? And they'd never seen anything like this before. What do you mean they're not showing themselves? We're supposed to stand on opposite sides and raise our guns and shoot at each other, right? And these guys are hiding out and they're firing from places we can't see and can't fire back into. That's the idea, right? Is that they find these unique ways to do the unexpected. They focus on weak points. They go where others fear to tread, right? So they're undeterred by the things that seem hard, right? But often they're the places where maybe the most value can be gained because nobody's wanted to go in there before. And they adapt quickly. They understand conditions are going to change. They don't get locked into one way of doing things. Right? It kind of fits in with some of the unconventional method approach, but like our Marines, they improvise, they adapt, and they overcome. They're very good at that, right? But they are prepared for the things are not going to go well. And so what am I going to do quickly to adjust for that? Can I do that and adjust more quickly than my adversaries can? And that's where success will come from. So how did I get to this line of thinking? Okay. So it comes from, I attended a talk at a conference a long time ago by a gentleman named Ken Crow, who is now retired, but he was an engineering consultant. And he gave a talk called Guerilla Tactics for Concurrent Engineering. This is like in the 80s or something like that, that I attended this. And it was a lot of this kind of thing where he was talking about, just go out and do it. What are you waiting for permission for? You know this is the right thing to do. Here's ways you can just start getting things done in this area. So if you're not familiar with the term, concurrent engineering was a new concept in the 80s and 90s. Today, there's a lot of other terms of integrated product development is probably the more common phrase we use these days, cross-functional development, things like that, right? It's integrated teams and getting everybody in early on. But that was, in the 80s, that was sort of controversial. Everything was much more sequential. We started with R&D and you let them do their thing and do their thing and do their thing, and then they threw it over the wall to operations, and they went off to the next cool thing, and then operations to figure out how to build it and do everything else downstream. Meanwhile, sales is screaming, hey, engineering's done, how come I can't sell this yet, right? Those kind of things. Concurrent engineering was saying, well, what if we got everybody working on the project from the start? Okay? And that was scary. Some people mentioned that they were in project management. For project managers, the idea of not having nice sequence to manage blew their minds, right? That was like, how am I going to manage people that are doing things at the same time? And what they do might not be correct because we might learn something and then we'll have to do it again. And how am I going to explain that to them that, oh, you have to start over again, right? And it just seemed, well, that seems wasteful. Why would I have manufacturing engineers join in early in the design? We don't know what the design is yet. We're just going to waste their time. Right? Not missing the fact that they actually might have good input, so we get a better design in the first place. And yes, that means we're going to iterate and throw some stuff away. But it was very unique in terms of thinking. And like I said, for project managers in particular, it looked really scary for how are they going to manage their schedules when everybody's in the pool at once. Right? If I have deadlines, sequential deadlines, that's easy to manage, isn't it? Right? From a Gantt chart perspective, just everything connects. Right, and project managers could do their jobs effectively. So my approach was based on learning from Ken, is for my own small projects that I had going on. I wasn't in a management position. I just started using this approach of bringing people in, right, thinking, all right, what's the total pathway look like, and involving everybody right from the start. Instead of going, well, I'll need you in a month or 2 months or whatever. It's like, no, I want you on right now, and we're going to talk this through, and we're going to see the bigger picture. And my projects were succeeding faster than other people's projects and under budget and more effectively. Okay? And so that started to get people's attention. That's part of it, right? You do something well, everybody goes, what is that guy doing over there? How come his projects get done so quickly? And he's on to his next one. And his projects seemed to work correctly. And he didn't spend too much money on it compared to other projects. How does this happen? So eventually, like I said, I got some notoriety. And finally found a comrade. There was finally a product development director who was willing to take the risks. And he said, all right, I've seen you doing something unique there. On our next product development, now we're talking big project, right? He's like, I think you're onto something. Could you consult to my project internally? And let's see what we can do here to move this going. It wasn't a huge project. And so his manager was kind of willing to let him take the risk on this. This was Medtronic, we were doing pacemakers. Typical pacemaker project at the time was like 3 years and $6 million in investment at that time. He was tasked with, could we make a pacemaker that we could sell in third world countries where there is no healthcare insurance? So could you sell a pacemaker at the same price as a refrigerator? Those pacemakers typically cost a minimum of $5,000 and upwards of $30,000. Right? Which is great if you have a country with healthcare coverage, but in some places where there could be large populations like India, they don't have healthcare coverage. So if we could get a product where they could have to make a decision, well, we were going to get a new refrigerator, but grandpa needs a pacemaker. So I guess this month we'll buy the pacemaker at $600. So that's what he was tasked with, and they didn't give him a whole lot of money to do that with. They gave him about $1 million, and they said, we'll give you 12 months to figure this out. And that's what we worked on. Right? So he was willing to take some risks because the project was already going to be high risk and they were sort of setting him up for failure at this point. And so we went through this and we applied this approach of bring everybody in and try this unique everybody's in the pool at once and we'll figure out how to manage the schedules, but we'll get a lot of good input. Cut to the chase, the project was done in 6 months for half the money. And yes, we produced a pacemaker that could have sold for $593. It did not go on the market, unfortunately, because the catch was one of the most expensive components in a pacemaker is the battery. And that's why companies like Medtronic and other pacemakers would make their own batteries, because the Ever-Readies of the world won't touch that. We actually put a button cell battery inside. It was all the power it needed, but none of the battery companies would sell us those button cell batteries. So that kind of killed it. Anyway, so that's kind of the lesson there, right? Is that you've got to just try some things out, show some successes. That will bring other people to your door. We'll talk more about how to do those things going forward here. But that was kind of my background here. All right, so challenges we kind of talked about during the introductions. It is human nature to hate change. Okay, fear it, hate it, loathe it, whatever, right? We are just, even people say, oh, I'm comfortable with change, still feel stress when there's change. It's just how we're wired, right? When things are going smoothly and we know what to expect, it's always a more comfortable position to be in than now something is going to change. One of the variables is going to change. And certainly if it's not your idea, right? And I heard a lot of that theme of trying to get others to understand and buy into this, right? It's the not invented here syndrome, but that wasn't my idea, right? So why should I want to be part of this? The recognition that some of these activities in the quality world, things like Six Sigma, Lean, 5S, are not easy to implement. They take time, they take effort, they take resources, meaning money, right? So there is an investment here, right? And there is some risk associated with it. And that can often create just a barrier to, why do we need this? It's going to be this hard, right? It's hard to see if things, and that's another problem, right? If you're in a situation where things are going well, then it's really hard to get people to change. Pain is a good motivator. Things are on fire, then they usually pay attention. But if things are going okay, it's always a tough sell, right? To explain how it could be even better, right? Because it looks good right now. As I kind of alluded to on the previous slide, right? The upper management that gets to make the decisions often isn't willing to take the risks that you are, okay? So when I'm out there espousing for concurrent engineering and I'm just a lowly engineer and I'm trying to tell a senior director or a VP, hey, you should try this new approach to project management, and they see all these risks and they're going, not on my career, we're not, right? Because that's part of the truth of the world is the lower you are in the org chart, the more you typically fear losing your job, when the reality is the people who lose their job the most easily are the ones higher up, right? There's less tolerance for mistakes as you go up the chain. And so they're gonna go, no, I understand what you're saying, I'm not taking that on. I've worked hard to get to this position and I'm not gonna screw it up because you had an idea, right? That may or may not work. Lesson. And then sometimes they buy in, but they go, oh, as long as we're doing that, let's do these 5 other things. Or, brilliant idea, I know how to make it even better, right? And suddenly they kind of co-opt it and make it their own all of a sudden, right? So they have their own ideas for how to, and then suddenly it doesn't look at all like what you were trying to do. So I see quite a few nodding heads I didn't see online, but based on your introductions, I think there's a lot of recognition of these scenarios here. I don't think anybody's surprised. So what causes that resistance? Right? So a couple of good quotes out there, because no presentation is good without a few good quotes from people you have no idea who they are. But I found these 2 that I was like, right, change is not made without inconvenience, even from worse to better. Richard Hooker was a British theologian. I don't know who he is, I just like this quote, but he's right. And similarly, any change, even a change for the better, is always accompanied by drawbacks and discomforts. That was British novelist Arnold Bennett. And I kind of talked about that, right? That even when it's going to make things better, even if you are somebody who says they're comfortable with change, change does create stress. Because it's change. You're going to have to do something different now, and you're going to get out of your comfort zone, even if for a short time. And I'd rather just stay in my nice comfy spot, right? Where things are the same every day, and I know what I'm doing, and everybody else knows what they're doing, and there's no problems. So why? Why does this bother me so much? So there's loss, there's this fear that I'm gonna have to give something up, you're gonna change the world, and I lose some sort of power in that world. I used to do a lot of automation projects. You were definitely gonna cause people to fear loss at that point, right? Because you're taking something that they do on a manual basis, and you're gonna go, oh, we're gonna put this piece of software in place, it's just gonna do that. You won't need to do that at all, right? So they fear that they're gonna lose their authority, they're gonna lose their jobs. And I literally, I don't know if any of you were set any live fans. Rob Schneider used to do the copier guy bit. He was the guy that ran the copy machine. Okay, I literally had that person working. I was the head of doc control, and that was this person's job. Was she made the copies so that the hard copies could be distributed to the different areas of the building, and she was great at it. And she was very sociable, and that was part of it too. She got to walk around every day and go to these different departments and drop off their change documentation. And I walk in and I go, why are we doing that? We have electronic documentation here. Everybody's got a computer in their department. And this was early on, but computers were there. They were in the manufacturing areas. We just need to send them an email and say, this document is updated. Go pull it from the repository. She was literally in tears, which I'm not trying to do, but that's what you're running into, right? Is that for her, that was her whole world. That was everything she did, and we just completely annihilated it. And she'd been doing it, no kidding, for like 40 years. And it never occurred to her to get any additional skills. Nobody had ever said, hey, you should get training in email and electronic documentation. It was not in her wiring. So that's a real thing to have to think about. But that's often what drives it. If people are fearing, or they at least perceive, they're going to lose some control or some power or something there. You're shifting things around often. The workflow is going to change. And so there's often like, well, that's going to just make my job harder. And so it's sometimes tough. And sometimes that's true. It's going to make somebody else's job easier and somebody else's job harder. And how do you get them to see the bigger, broader picture? Remember, this is for the company's good, right? The organization's good, not for your good. And so, yes, but it means you have to be listening and understand, right? Am I actually causing that? Was that really my intent? Was to make somebody else's job harder at the expense of another place that's now going to have an easier time with it? Or they just might interpret it as a loss anyway, right? So everybody's unhappy. But you have to be aware of these things and how you're going to address them. There's confusion. If we're not very clear on what the change is and how we're going to get there, what's the vision, what's the pathway, then even if they understand the concept, they're going to kind of go, I have no idea where you're trying to go and how you're going to get there. Why would I get on that path? And so that's always something you're going to watch for. And then things are changing. So as I talked about the copier lady, she simply, truly did not have the confidence to do it. Not everybody's great at every job. Okay, we ran into this when I was doing computer-aided design stuff, and we were switching from, well, we had literally in a few years gone from drafting tables to 2D CAD to 3D CAD to 3D modeling software. Medtronic at the time was going big into 3D modeling. It's what I was hired to help them do. And the thinking was we had people whose titles were drafters. You have drafters, designers, and engineers. And they said, that's no problem. The drafters will become designers. That's not the same thing. It's not the same type of thinking. The drafters were very good at figuring out how to lay things out visually. A designer is kind of like a junior engineer. They figure out, the engineer have these broad ideas, how to apply the science, and then they give it to a designer who says, well, the reality is, this is how it's going to be built because these are the parts we can buy or the limitations of our manufacturing. And now you're going to think these people that their job was just simply to draw and go, oh, we need you to be smart about design concepts. And many of them failed. It just wasn't in their wiring or choice of how to address not having to get rid of them, right? That was the thing. We were trying to avoid the ugly piece of, yeah, some of these people might be out of jobs. Or can we find something similar, right, and get them into something where their strengths play? Instead, we said, oh, you just need to change. This is easy, right? It's all under the engineering umbrella, so you should be able to do it. But sometimes it's a real issue with competence, others it's just a perceived. Right? I've gotten so used to doing this, I don't think I can be successful because I know. So we were changing out an ERP system at one point. I had people just going, I know that system inside and out. I know where its nuances are. I know where it does funky stuff. And now you're gonna replace that with a new system that I'm not gonna know anything. I'm not gonna be the expert. So one, there's loss, right? It seems like a burden. My job's gonna get harder, and I don't even know if I can do it because my expertise lies in the current system. And as I already alluded to, the not invented here, it's not my idea. You didn't ask me, so no, I can't buy into this. As soon as you're ready to hear my ideas on this, then absolutely I'll help you out. Right, so you gotta watch for those personalities that are gonna be insulted by the fact that you had an idea that they didn't have. Or that you didn't think to invite them to the discussion. Anybody encounter this? I saw heads nodding the whole time, okay? Online, I'm gonna assume you guys have seen similar things to this, these kind of personalities. So in order to be effective, right, you do have to be aware of these things. You have to think about in your guerrilla tactics, how am I going to address this? And if you think about anywhere there's a rebellion somewhere worldwide, whether it's for a good reason or a bad reason, you can see elements of the strategy where they're addressing this kind of thing. They're figuring out for the masses, how are they going to deal with this, right? So guerrilla leaders know that these are the things they're going to have to put into their plan. All right, so let's go back to what we talked about, in the introductions. Anybody have some additional stuff based on the previous slide that they want to share? Anybody run into the not invented here syndrome? But can you tell us anything about that?
I actually just give them the cape. I let them take all the credit. I can't get this to work on my own. I need you to do this, that's how I made that work.
Okay, yeah, I've done something similar. I had a boss and I just could not get my ideas past him, and finally kind of got to step back and go, stop getting emotionally invested right off the bat. Let me show him my preliminary ideas and let him give me his feedback. And I get some of his words in there, so by the time I get the final version, it sounds like him, even though it all came from me with his input. And then he's like, great idea, Steve. We're gonna do that. I think, did you have an example?
Yeah, and so my strategy has been to identify somebody in a department that has like the innate quality mindset, even if they don't have the quality experience, and kind of make them a double agent, flip them to my side and start working with them, and then it kind of spreads through.
And we're gonna talk exactly about that approach, yeah, like how you build your forces. Right?
Yeah, because it's often not like the actual doers, it's the management who doesn't really understand the process that are resistant to a lot of things. Because they say, well, this only takes 5 minutes, what's the big deal? But when you're doing it 50 times a day, that's a lot of time. And they don't often see that.
Yep, right. Anything else besides going back, let's go back. Any of these other ones, anybody have any good stories?
One other thing you like quotes, I like quotes. One of the things I got on a fortune cookie said, discontent is the first step toward progress. And so I loved torturing someone to say, this isn't good enough, this isn't good enough, this isn't good, until they buy into that. And then, okay, now we can work together. I've irritated you enough that you understand we're doing this together.
That's not bad. I had similar experience. My boss calls me into my office one time, this is early in my career, and he says, so what's wrong? I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, I'm thinking you're not really working very hard. And I'm like, what? And he goes, nobody has called me like in 3 weeks to complain about you. So what are you doing? That was good. He wanted me to make change, and he was gonna back into this stuff. And the fact that nobody was complaining, calling him up, going, what's with this Gompertz guy? And he comes in with all these weird ideas, right? That he could then help me defend. So that was good. But yeah, so sometimes like creating that pain as a motivator is a good way to go. All right. Good. Anything online? Anybody online have any good stories they want to share? I don't want to forget you guys. No? Okay.
I guess it took me a minute to unmute. I just thought for the fears that you're talking about, sometimes it was helpful to have like a lunch and learn where everybody could come and make some input about their concerns, and we could I guess, they felt more, heard and in authority about their position if they had a chance to vent it in a setting where everyone else could hear it. That helped me sometimes.
And food is an amazing motivator, free food.
Yes, over lunch, of course.
Yes, so early on when I was in Medtronic, I was on the R&D side of the world. And we had lunch meetings and snack meetings all the time, right? Because we had R&D budget to spend. And then I switched over to the operations side where they're watching every penny. And the first time I called a team meeting and I provided lunch, I was like a god. I could get there, talk about building your troops. I could get these people to do anything now because I bought them sandwiches. It's like, it was amazing. Anyway, all right, good discussions there. All right. So I think we'll all agree, right? Fear tends to be sort of the root of all of this. There's some form of fear that's going to be in your way. You're going to have to get past with that. All right. So let's move on to some of the tactics then, how you get this done. So my favorite one, everybody likes the title, hide the vegetables, because I think it's clear and everybody gets that, right? You know, and the concept is, right? You know, if I'm at a restaurant and the side is zucchini, I'll eat it. I don't hate zucchini, but it wouldn't have been my first choice. But put it in zucchini bread, give me some butter, right? I'm all over it, right? That's the concept. Can we turn the vegetables into sweet bread kind of thing? So, right, we talked about moving quickly, but also quietly. And that's this concept, is how do I do these things very quietly without anybody really understanding to do it? There's nothing that says that you have to call what you're doing by its actual name. If that's gonna create, if you know, if I say Six Sigma, people are gonna stiffen up. If I say concurrent engineering or, you know, whatever the term, the official term is, that's gonna catch their attention in the wrong way, then don't use that term. Call it something else. Don't refer to it all. Just think about the specific things you're doing, right? Because people come with these preconceived notions. Oh, my last company tried Six Sigma. What a disaster that was. Okay, great. We're off to a wonderful start here, okay? Or whatever biases they bring in, right? That they saw it happen in other places and something worked, something didn't, and they just assume it's gonna be the same thing here, and now you're fighting that uphill battle. So don't put the idea in their head. Right? Don't use the exact terminology. So when you're doing things like writing procedures, you have the opportunity to create a procedure. You can build in the methodologies, the workflows into that procedure. Maybe just a little bit at a time. Right? Everybody understands, well, I hate to say the old story about, right, a frog. If you put them in a pot of cold water and then raise the temperature, they stay in. If you drop them into a pot of boiling water, they jump out, right? It's that kind of thing. Can you slowly start building? So can you just get in there and start manipulating the process, one small change at a time to make it start following the methodology you want to do? I didn't say Six Sigma. I just said, first, I'd like you to define the problem, right, which is the first step in Six Sigma. And then later you build in a measurement step in there somewhere, right? And I have an example coming up here where I found somebody actually doing that in the place I was working. Forms can be structured to capture the data you're looking for. People typically don't argue a lot about forms. They know they have to fill them out and they just do it. And they usually don't think a lot about them. So if you just start adding the fields you want, be careful about what you call them, right? So you don't give away that there's warfare going on here. And then they start giving you the data and they don't realize why they're giving it, right? It looks like it fits in with everything else on the form. So why not? Of course, I'll come back in here. We will talk about this in the next section on fear and measurement. Because that will play a role as well. But this is another way to start sneaking this stuff in. And sometimes hiding in plain sight is okay. I'm just going to start using the terms. I'm going to sneak them in places. I'm not going to write a whole section called Six Sigma, but I'm going to talk about the concepts of define, measure, analyze, implement, control throughout the process. And I'll actually use those words. They'll be right there in front of people, but if they don't see them all together and I didn't call it Six Sigma, then they're not going to be aware that that's what they're being handed at this point, right? So these are some of the ways to sneak this stuff in. So this is the example. I got to, this is actually Boston Scientific. I just started as a new quality engineer. And of course, that meant I had to go through Kappa training. And I got to do my first Kappa, and I pulled up the form, and I started filling it out, and the highlighting I added afterwards. The highlighting was not on the form, but when I pulled it up, I started going through the form, and I went, okay, once we fill out the typical stuff, and the first section is, okay, I gotta define the issue. Yep, of course, I gotta describe what's going on. And then, once I understand the measurement aspect of it, great, you know, that's section 3, and then I go to section 4, and it wants me to analyze that stuff, and suddenly I went, wait, define, measure, analyze, DMA. If you're not familiar with Six Sigma, the concept's called DMAIC, DMAIC. And I went, is section 5 improved? Yes, it is, and section 6 is controls. And I went, this form is based on Six Sigma, but it doesn't say that anywhere, and it didn't say that in the procedure either. So I went and I found the guy who owned the procedure in the form. And I knock at his door, and go, hey, just something I noticed, maybe I'm nuts, but is it just me, or is this form using a Six Sigma approach? And he went, shh. Nobody's supposed to realize that. He goes, management here doesn't like the Six Sigma thing because it's going to be too expensive and black belts and all the training. So I'm sneaking it in. I've been doing that for about 1.5 years. I figure I got about another year till everybody gets used to this. And then I can go back and I can sell Six Sigma again. And they'll go, you mean that thing we're already doing? Yes, we're going to do it that way, right? And I started to find that he had done this in a lot of places in the quality system. Not just with Six Sigma, but with other concepts. And as again, if you saw each individual section of something, it didn't make sense. But if you took a step back and you went, wait, that's 5S, or that's lean, or you know, whatever the concept was, he was hiding this Easter eggs all over the place, basically. I thought this guy is absolutely brilliant. So this comes from a guy named Steve Sarniak, who also speaks frequently at these events. So definitely listen to Steve talk. So he's very interesting to listen to and watch, because he moves all over the room. He'll definitely keep you awake. But yeah, that was where I learned that one from Steve. So, all right. So let's do a little brainstorming, get everybody staying engaged here. So let's talk about some ideas for how you might hide the vegetable for some quality methods. So let's start with lean. Anybody familiar? Everybody not familiar with lean? Okay, well, it's basically right there. It's right. It's about reducing waste in these areas. Okay, transport, what it sounds like, maintaining too much inventory, having too much motion in the project process, too much wait time built into the process, overproducing, over processing. How shiny does it need to be before I stop waxing it, kind of thing. Building in defects and not having the right skills in place. All of those are wastes, right? So lean is about how do you minimize those. So what can we do? How can we hide that we're implementing lean thinking into the organization?
One of the techniques that I've used is a spaghetti diagram. Just have them take a layout of the factory and walk the process with them to show them how material flows back and forth in all different ways, and just at the very end show them the inefficiencies of the amount of overwalking and just as well as the weight. And don't call it a value stream map, but I just using that to help collect some information for them to look at.
Yeah, right. I wouldn't call it a value stream map. I wouldn't call it a time motion study, or all those technical terms. Just go, hey, you know, like I said, I just decided to like follow somebody one day, follow the product through the factory, and just mapped it out, and look what we get. And then picture's worth 1,000 words, right? And I've used a similar approach, and then all of a sudden they're begging to do this stuff. It's like, really? That's what we do? That's ridiculous. That's so stupid. Why do we have that work cell over there, and you know, the product worked back and forth? We had a guy come in and do that at a place, and we found that from the moment a component came in the door to went back out as a finished product, it traveled 3.5 miles. This is in a 30,000 foot facility that was mostly warehouse. How does it travel 3.5 miles over the course of, I think it was 6 days, right? So now in that case, he was brought in to do a time motion study, so they were already bought into it. But the same thing could have been, we could have just had somebody do that. Go, look, you know, our product moves 3.5 miles within this facility to get out the door. And then have somebody go, what, wait, why, where are we doing that, right? Well, too much motion, you know, and it takes 6 days, why does it take 6 days, right? That gets into the weighting thing. So yeah, I think having that kind of visual without telling people the fancy name for it is a good way to do it. Any other examples out there? Let's try a different one, actually. How about 5S? You guys familiar with 5S? Sort, set, shine, standardize, and sustain. What have you done? Anybody done anything or seen anything unique done to sneak that in? Telling your kids to clean up their room, right? That's what this amounts to.
So we're very paper-based, and so we're slowly moving into the 1990s with electronic systems. But I set up like a document station that has like the hole punch, the paper cutter, the multiple staplers that can handle different sizes of paper stacks. Because people would try to use one stapler for everything. And I just kind of set it up and put the staplers like in order. So it's not exactly 5S, I didn't like outline with tape or anything, but I just kept on like, you know, keep everything here, let's keep all the staples here. And it really reduced how much time people were spending. And it sounds ridiculous, but
I have a similar staple story as well. I worked at a place that I was managing everything documentation, which included a department that did the scanning of the production batch records, which came stapled.
Yes.
Which meant the people in the scanning room had to get the staple out without damaging the paper so it could go through this, right? And we did one of them did one day go, here's how much time I spend removing staples every day. And I don't remember what the number was, but it was a lot of time out of their day, just removing staples, right? And, you know, and we're thinking about, I mean, literally this was, it had just been in manufacturing that morning, right? So the staples lifespan was a few hours, right? How many staples are we buying? And then she actually came back and said, think about that. I pull this many staples in a day. That's like an entire box. How much is each box? And how many boxes are we, you know, right? So, you know, it's tough to go, well, we don't want the paperwork to fly around. So again, finding somebody who will be your cohort, your spy or whatever, or work for you. I found somebody who was a work cell leader. And I said, I want you to do me a favor. What? I want you to pull all the staplers and just put a box of paper clips. And they did it. And that's what started to go there, right? And now it's just move a paper clip and scan, move a paper clip and scan, right? We didn't have to go ask somebody for permission to go, you know, have them argue about, oh, I don't know if the paper clip will be as effective. We didn't want to get into all those arguments, we just wanted the staples to go away, right? So that, you know, make it easier, you know, and cost-wise, a box of paper clips, right? Well, we could reuse them because we could send them back, right? At the end of the day, we could sort of recycle them. And then eventually we got to put them into a clear folder, right? A traveler, basically. Okay, and those could just recycle back in it as well. All right. Anybody familiar with statistical process control? Ooh, statistics, math. We hate math. It's all this math, but you know, people generally go, oh, math, it's gonna be hard. Anybody have a good story about getting good statistical methodology in place secretly? No? This is a good place for sneaking things into forms to at least get the data, right? And not telling people where the data is going, but you're gonna bring it back and put it into your spreadsheet or into Minitab or some tool. But at least now you got the data, right? You'll do all the mathematics. They didn't have to worry about the fear of doing math. They just have to give you the information. We're talking again about ways to collect data more effectively. I'm just looking at some of the comments here. Somebody had zucchini for lunch today. Okay. Okay. All right. Any others that you've done or seen done in a creative way?
I worked with a guy that analyzed things as cost of poor quality. So you can say like, when this happens, it costs the company $50. When this one, it's $100, and we quantified it. It wasn't very biting the vegetables, but upper management loved it. To be able to quantify this is what
Yeah.
for quality costs.
And we're gonna talk about that later, about how to talk management's language. That comes out of the 7 habits. Yeah, but you'll see all of this, right? A lot of these things can be done individually, but you'll see some connective tissue to all of these approaches. That they do often kind of create their own methodology, this guerrilla methodology to get things done. And you need them. Like anything else, right? You can't just have one tool in your toolbox ever. You have to have multiple tools and you have to understand how to use them together.
I have an interesting,
Yeah.
kind of, with the startup, very academic and R&D based, and getting the manufacturing side, who also are R&D, to buy into more defined batch records. We increased our events system so that they had to start writing deviations. And they're like, well, we need to define our batch records better now that we're writing all these deviations to our records. And it sped up more defined batch records.
Okay, great. Yep, we're gonna talk about deviations later. It's good. All right, I think everybody gets the idea. Those are good examples, right? And hopefully the wheels are spinning, ways you might be able to sneak some stuff in there. Any questions? Everybody's pretty clear on the high dimension?
I have kind of a burning question.
Sure.
Like, one of the principles we have is partnership with our departments. And it kind of rubs me the wrong way of thinking of doing something in a sneaky way, but do you find this works better with suppliers and outside companies, or do it internally as well?
I actually find it works better internally because you can see the battlefield better. As soon as you go outside, you don't quite have the ability to surveil, and I'll use this term later, surveilling the battlefield more clearly. And there's always a possibility that you're jeopardizing the partnership, that they won't like you manipulating their organization from the outside. But have I done it? Yes, right? Where I've got a supplier who's not quite getting it, you gotta figure out how to get them to do things without, because they have their own budgets and their own priorities, and you go in and they go, hey, you guys should really have a project opened or an initiative to do this, and they kind of go, yeah, we'll think about that, right? There are other ways to do it, but it's a little tougher unless you have somebody to help you on the inside, right? You've got to have an insider, or there are things you can do like the forms you're providing them, right? What you're asking back from them might start changing some of the mindsets there. But I do find that, yeah, doing this internally is going to be a lot easier because it's a battlefield you're familiar with. Great. Other questions? Anything online? Okay. All right, let's start talking about that measuring without fear then, right? About measuring processes rather than people. And that's kind of the crux of it. Because anytime you take measurements, everybody assumes you're measuring them, right? When what you really want to understand is the process. So there's a lot of great quotes out there. In God we trust, all others bring data. Everybody know this one? Usually attributed to W. Edwards Deming. He never said that, but it's a great quote. Without data, you're just another person with an opinion. Also attributed to Deming, and he never said it, but still makes sense. And then this one, where there's fear, you do not get honest figures. That's Deming. Is everybody familiar with Deming, Duran, the Quality Gods? You should learn them. Their books are expensive, but they're great. But Deming and Duran are kind of the two quality gods that everybody quotes most. And then there's some others I'll reference here as well. But yeah, so there is this problem of, are people making assumptions about why the measurements are being asked for? And will they then skew the results as a result of that, whether intentionally or unintentionally? Right? If they think you're measuring me and I'm going to lose my job over this, if the numbers don't look good, right? Then suddenly you don't get very accurate numbers. So, as I said, everybody just said, right? The problem is if they perceive that it's the individual being measured rather than the process being measured, then you're already starting from a bad position here. They may just view it as it's burdensome. I got work to do. I don't have time to fill out your stupid form, okay? Or to fill out more stuff on your form, right? Or to go, oh, I got to put that on a scale and take a measurement, or I got to pull out a micrometer or something. That's another step, okay? When I was in my early days of my career, when I was trying to automate the use of CAD systems, I literally had a guy and he would count keystrokes. And so if I said, look, here's a new way I'd like you to do this, then he would count how many keystrokes it took versus how many it took him yesterday. And God forbid that I gave him more keystrokes today than he had yesterday. Right? That was his view of whether or not I was adding value. Was if I could eliminate keystrokes, then he was with me. If I added keystrokes, even if it produced something better, he didn't care. It was more keystrokes, it was more time. Right? That was going to slow him down. So you want to be careful about becoming a burden to the process. Your methods alone, right? If you don't pick the right method, you could end up skewing the results. There is this concept of what's called test method validation. People familiar with that concept, right? How do you know it's the right way to measure something? Which gets into that your methods may not be effective in telling you what you think it's telling you. Okay? I need to measure something very thin. Can I use a wood ruler for that? A ruler is for taking dimensional measurements, right? Not in this situation. I probably want a micrometer, right? Something more capable of measuring small dimensions on thin items. That's part of the idea of test method validation. Is this the right tools, the right approach? You'll hear this term gauge R&R for repeatability and reproducibility. Repeatability is if I run this, take this measurement with this tool, and then I do it again, will I get the same measurement every time? Right? Anybody does any woodworking or jobs around the house, right? They always say measure twice, cut once, right? Never measure something and the measurement comes out different 3 times. You go, what am I doing wrong here? Okay, could be because you're using the wrong tool to take the measurement. And reproducibility is if it works for me and now I have you do it, do you get the same numbers by measuring the same thing in the same way? Right? That's part of making sure you've got the right approach and the right equipment to do this. But you need to think about those things. Because there's a lot of times you go to think about, oh, how am I going to measure? Oh, I know how to measure that. And it turns out that's not really the right way at all. And you're going to be giving yourself bad data, which is going to then take you down the wrong path, and you're going to implement the wrong vegetables, right? And all that kind of stuff. It's just going to totally guide you the wrong way here. So from the Guerilla Tactics perspective, we talked about finding allies. Okay? And your allies have to be people who are embedded in where you're trying to affect change. You can't stand on the outside and pretend you know as much as people who are doing it. Right? So you do have to get to know those people inside those processes. Just talking to them. If they're unfamiliar with you, then you need to establish credibility with them and that you're not a threat, right? Why are you down here, right? I mean, as a head of quality, I used to like to walk the manufacturing floor. And initially, it was just like, what are you doing here? Why are you walking around here watching me do my work? Right? I had to find more friendly ways to get in there, right? Maybe if I met him in the lunchroom first, and, what do you do? Oh, would you mind if I came over and, saw that operation? Because people are usually, then it's like a pride thing. Oh, I'd be happy to show you my work cell and how I do this, because I'm good at it, right? Kind of thing. You got to get in with them, right? You got to make them your buddies. But you want to do things like don't, get stuck in assumptions. Right? If we're standing on the outside, we think we know the best approach, we're often making a lot of incorrect assumptions. We often then don't confirm those hypotheses. Oh, I know what's wrong with that process. We don't take any measurements to confirm that we're right. Everybody remember the scientific method? You probably learned it in 3rd grade or something, right? That was correct. You have an hypothesis, well, now go test it. Go see if it's actually correct. And as I said, build up trust, right? If you walk in there and go, quality's here, everybody hides and scurries. Right? You got to make them feel like whether it's quality or whatever, environment you're coming out of, that you're not a threat to them, that you're here to help. We're your ally, so be our ally, kind of thing, right? You're trying to build up that team, that army. Surveilling the battlefield, so I use this terminology before, right? Make sure you know what everything looks like. Have you ever actually been there? Am I just hearing that there's a problem in this work cell, or have I actually seen that work cell in action? Kind of thing. So again, right, you should get down there and go actually watch the work. And I've got that saying about be stealthy, but not secretive. The stealthy part is you don't want to influence what's going on, right? Because again, if you just show up and you're watching, then results will skew in one of 2 directions. Either it will be done perfectly because you're standing there, or they're gonna start making mistakes because you're freaking them out by standing there. Either way, you're not getting the correct picture of things, right? So you have to be, like I said, slow and stealthy, get some credibility, work your way in as one of them, or at least a friendly, visitor, and then you can start seeing what's actually going on. Just because, be careful about the secretive thing, because that could set you back a long way. We were having problems in a manufacturing operation at one point. And I had a team of quality techs, and they were well known, and they were going in there and trying to do the observation. They weren't getting it. I'm just kind of going, I'm frustrated. I'm not seeing it directly. I need to see this. And the room that this was happening in had glass windows around it. So I went into a different part of the factory and I stood back and I watched through the window. And it took all of about 10 minutes for somebody to turn around and see me standing there on the other side of the floor, staring through the window as they did their stuff. And then I see that guy from quality is over there. Shoot, I just totally screwed up that relationship for a while. I'm gonna have to come back, right? So be careful about doing that. You can set yourself back. And then you've got to do that direct observation. It's great to get to know people, talk to them, sit down and listen to their stories. Yes, there's value in that. But even they sometimes are not realizing what it is they're seeing. Right? You need to step back and go, well, I need to see it as well. Even sometimes the data, right? Because again, if the data isn't being collected in the right way, you may be missing really important nuances in there. So a lot of times seeing it helps. So I can't remember if I had this on the slide there, but I'll tell the story now. So we had another operation in the same place. It was a fill operation, and the amount of liquid going into the container was critical to the performance of the product. And all of a sudden, we were getting a lot of failures where we started to realize that once they were sealed, the right amount of fluid was not inside the product. So we're trying to figure out where is this going wrong here? Because they've got a scale and they measure every one of them. And they fill that out on a sheet. And the data says every one of them is filled correctly. And then they seal it, and all of a sudden it's not filled correctly. We talk, we get them in a room, we go back through the work instruction. This is what you got. Does this reflect accurately what you're doing? Yes, that's exactly what we do. The work instruction is correct, and that's what we do. We go down, we try to observe, and it looks correct. We're missing something here. Something subtle is going on here. But one of my people is got a good reputation. He's right. They see him as an ally. They trust him. And so one day he finally says, "Would you mind if I recorded this on video? I just set up a camera here and we just record the operation." They trust him, so yeah, that's okay. And of course, initially with the camera there, they know. And now it's like as if he's standing there and they're going to do it perfectly. But you let the camera run long enough and they forget it's there. And then we got pizza and we sat down and watched hours of video of this filling operation. And your eyes are half closed and you're trying to pay attention, right? And we're sitting around the room, all my quality techs. And all of a sudden one guy blurts out, "Wait, what was that? Stop, roll back. What'd you see?" We're watching it and we go, "Oh, there it is. The piece we were missing the entire time." And what it was is these containers were filled almost right to the brim. Right? And the process was supposed to be that they, I remember if I get this right, because I remember they measured it. So, so they fill the container, they put it on the scale, they make sure it's within the tolerances, and then they cap it. Put an adhesive on and they put a cap over it, right? And then they slide it off to the side, right? And let it finish curing and they go on to the next one. And in this case, they filled the container, they put it on the scale, they recorded the weight, and he picked the container up and moved it off to the side. And then he filled another one. And then he capped them all later. Okay, what's wrong with that? When he picks it up, because it's so full, he squeezes the product and some of the fluid comes off out of the top. Puts it down, picks up a rag and wipes it off. That tiny amount of fluid he was squeezing out was very tight tolerances. That was enough. Take it off. In his mind, he's following the process. But he reversed a couple of steps there. Right? That's where it was coming. like I said, talking to them, going back through the procedure, looking at the data, standing there, we were not picking that up. Right? You have to wait, you have to be patient sometimes, that's a good call. See the opportunity happen. All right. So the other problem, like I said, is becoming a burden. You don't want to be a distraction, you don't want it to be time consuming. You gotta remember, they often have other goals that you're about to conflict with, whether it's cycle time or defect reduction, right? And anything that takes their attention away from what they're normally doing raises the possibility that those numbers go in the wrong direction for them. And then they're not gonna like you very much, right? So you gotta figure out what is the most unobtrusive way to get what I need to get. So you need to think about simple ways of approaching this. You know, the concept of check sheets. Do I need them to actually enter a number, or do I give them a sheet with a bunch of numbers in a matrix and I just need them to put a tick mark? Right? If they're taking a measurement already, I don't need them to take time to write it down to 4 decimals, but I give them a range. If it's in this range, I want a check mark here. If it's in this range, and at least you get a histogram out of that. You know how often certain is going, and now you know where to drill into. Can we automate it? Could we set it up so yeah, they need to take a weight measurement and the product comes off the line and just slides onto the scale, and the scale records it into a spreadsheet for you and then it moves on. They don't need to do anything. We had that happen once. We were trying to figure out how to get 100% weight measurement on a particular process, and then we just happened to be having the machine serviced, and we happened to mention to the manufacturer, or the guys who custom built the equipment for us, what we were trying to do, and they said, well, you know, we've got a scale add-on for this machine, don't you? You do? How much is that? It was like trivial. It's like, yes, we want that. So it just connects right onto the machine and the product just slides right across the scale and takes a measurement. Right? Nobody has to even think about taking the measurement at that place. Can you just do it? I just need you to give me observations. Or is there some way to do it anonymously? Right? Can we be automating and taking the measurement without people even realizing that there's a measurement being taken, like that scale or something like that? Is there something, some feature we just turn on the machine and it would count something for us, right? So we don't need people to check off how many they made or something. It's fine. And then don't forget, is there already data that's out there? Sometimes we collect data, we're gonna talk about this later, just for the sake of collecting data, and there's all kinds of data out there that's just waiting for us to mine it, right? I always love this quote from somebody I worked with at Medtronic: stolen is half done. Right? She was not stuck in the not invented here syndrome. Matter of fact, she saw the opposite is true. If I can build off of somebody else's idea, then I'm halfway there. I don't have to invent this stuff from scratch. So don't forget, there may just be really good information out there that you can just grab and manipulate in a different way that nobody's thought to manipulate, right? You run it through Minitab. Nobody's running through Minitab. It's just sitting in a spreadsheet somewhere with really basic formulas. I don't know if you're familiar with Minitab. It's a statistical processing software. I don't use it. I'm not. So I love math. I hate stats. It's just not wired for that. So, but tools like Minitab take that, take care of that for you. But yeah, never forget. You may not have to do anything. It may already be there for you. All right, this is my filling operation example, which I already talked about. Oops. So how about you guys? Anybody encounter that where the data you got was bad because it got skewed due to fear?
I've had experiences where they've tried to implement a procedure where the person came from maybe a large company like Medtronic or Boston Scientific and have tried to implement something in a small company. And I always remind people, plagiarism is the best form of flattery, but poor implementation is a shame. So trying to get people to just say, oh, let's just do this because this is what worked at my last company, shows signs where people are trying to do the right thing, but they don't know another way of doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was involved in a lab investigation and happened to be in the lab while the analyst who had been involved in the investigation was doing some other work. And we had observed, we couldn't figure out like what was going on, but it was a continuous issue with the analyst. And I was doing something else in the lab, and I happened to notice that when she was pipetting, when somebody wasn't watching her, she was pipetting something very viscous, and she would go into the meniscus, and then she would wipe her pipette. And she was pulling out, and it was enough that was being pulled out. But anytime she was observed, she was doing it in the exact order that it was supposed to be done. So just because I spent a lot of time in the lab looking at other activities, I was able to observe without her knowing I was observing her, and not trying to be sneaky. It was just, it just happened, so.
Yeah, yeah. And that kind of thing happens, again, either unintentionally because they don't understand that technique, or intentionally. Because they got other metrics that they're trying to meet, so this one's not as important to them. Right, and they're gonna give you what you want. There was as I said, we review warning letters, there was one a couple of weeks ago of a manufacturer, pharmaceutical manufacturer, and FDA found that basically because they were under the gun and under time, that the quality department technicians were often making up the data. They didn't have time to perform all the actual tests, so if they saw a certain trend, then they just continued it to save time and catch back up. There were no actual data records being created. That's a bad situation. You don't want that. The other, I mean, it's equally dangerous if they don't fully understand the right way to do it, or the implication of not exactly, like squeezing the container and liquid comes out and then wiping it off. They didn't understand the ramifications of that, right? They didn't know what the tolerances were. They were just told it had to be between here and here. They don't know why that's good or bad. That's a whole nother topic about making sure people understand the why and what they're doing. So you want to do that stuff. How about this one? You have any experiences where you were able to learn something through a very non-traditional technique? We have the spaghetti diagram example before.
I went out on the floor one time and I was actually watching the manufacturing process. But I needed to watch what was going on this extrusion line, which was next to the one that I was actually observing. So in observing the one, then I could keep an eye on this one and see that they weren't doing one of the steps properly. But only by, and I was engaging with this operator over here, but actually watching what was going on over there out of the corner of my eye, looking for a particular thing that happened over there. When I did see it, then of course, I went back to the quality department. I'm an engineer, but I went back to the quality department and I said, this is going on. And so you're gonna have to observe it, but I know when you go out there, it's not gonna happen because it's the same thing. It's no.
So we'll classify that one as misdirection. Don't worry about what this hand's doing. Watch what this hand's doing. But yeah, I mean, that's another way to do it, right? How to get in there without them being biased one way or the other by the fact that you're there. Oh, he's not watching me, he's watching that guy, so I'm good. Right? I can stay calm and do what I need to do. Meanwhile, that's what you're actually watching. Anybody else have any other interesting approaches to gathering information in unique ways? No? All right, so, oh, that put us way ahead, actually. We're behind.
Well, we got lunch.
Oh, is it here? Oh, okay, so that works pretty well. Any general questions about the measurement challenges? We're in the easy stuff. We get into more difficult stuff. All right, so well, that's good news. Then we can actually take a full half hour. Yeah, we could actually 35 minutes for lunch. So let's do that. Get some food, re-energize.
We'll bring in a cart.
Yep. I'll just restart this one. Comes. Pause the recording, so you have to remember to remind me to turn the recording back on. All right, well, we're in the last 2 minutes. Let me just see if there's any questions that came up to you in mind about what we've covered so far. No, nothing? All pretty clear so far? No, ready to be gorillas? Shave your heads, get the tattoo. Boy, that's cold, sorry. All right. Well, I got a number of thumbs up online, everybody is, cameras going. So, Penny, edge into it slowly here. Right, edge into it. All right. Let's talk about things you can do better around documentation, right? We talked about slipping things into the documentation. But I like to add this as just a way to kind of make yourself somewhat of a hero in the organization around documentation, because we tend to overthink documentation in a lot of ways. So there are a number of things I like to say that are somewhat heretical from a quality and a regulatory perspective. This is one, that you really need to document less, not more. More actually works against you than you can think. But we know, right? We create procedures and work instructions, and then we get a CAPA, and we realize something wasn't clear, so we add another section, little SOP, and then another CAPA and another section. We just keep building out these tomes, these huge procedures that are just pages and pages and pages of text. And then we wonder why people still can't follow them correctly, because we're getting more and more detailed and more words as we go through this. And so the question is that really helping us to make longer procedures that cover everything, A to Z, you know, start of a process all the way to the end of the process, all in one place, so nobody has to think about where to find this stuff. Okay? The reality is, the bigger the document gets, the less likely is anybody's going to read it. Right? Or the harder it is to find what they're actually looking for in the document, because we often write for multiple audiences. There's a whole other theory around that, about you should write small documents for one target audience. Right? So everybody gets exactly what they need to know. But yeah, the bigger the document really doesn't help you with that. Getting more prescriptive in your detail does not reduce. Actually, it probably creates more opportunities to have variances and deviations and just non-compliance or non-conformance to the requirements that are being documented. Again, because it's harder to find everything, it's harder to understand everything. And it's just easier to forget, right? If I'm trained to a 5-page procedure versus being trained to a 50-page procedure, I'm lucky if I remember the 5-page procedure and all of its contents. I'm not going to remember 50 pages of information. So why should I be surprised when the process doesn't work correctly because of that? Then add in language, the comprehension level. Right? It's just a part of reality. We have a lot of English as a second language, employees in our midst, and that, or just different levels of experience. Okay? What do they usually say you should write a document? What level, what grade level?
Fourth grade.
4th grade or 6th grade usually either comes up, right?
I thought it was 8th grade.
Well, then there's a lot of debates, right? Which one is it, right? So if you actually run the spelling and grammar checker in Word, you might be surprised what number comes up when it tells you what you've written to. Often it's above 12. Right? Which means it's college level you're writing for some of these things for. Not surprisingly, given the high-tech environments we're in, right? It's hard to write simply. But the reality is your workforce may not be anywhere close to that. And that's not saying that these aren't smart people. When you add in ESL, it's their ability to understand the nuances of the language. They may be able to speak English just fine, but comprehending, especially technological terminology and concepts, gets difficult. One of the places I work, they did reading comprehension on production employees and found out they were reading at a 3rd grade level. And the norm was we were trying to write to a 6th grade level. That's a big gap, right? So what a surprise that we're seeing all these problems in production, right? We're not really writing for the audience. The engineers understood it, and that's the problem as authors of documents. We often write for ourselves, and we forget you don't. You write for your audience. And you've got to think about what is going to be the best way to convey that information. And then forget about if they don't even speak English and you have to translate. I used to run a translation department. I would say just avoid this in your career if you can, because it's so hard to do correctly. I mean, think about anything you've bought on Amazon that was manufactured somewhere else, and that they clearly use something like Google Translate to create the work instructions. Right? How well did that go? right? Some of them are downright funny sometimes in their wording. It's just really challenging. I worked at a place, I came in, it was my first week, I was the head of quality there. And a change request came across and it was for the French translation of our IFU. Okay. And I thought, normally it's just right, you get the English language version is attached, the certificate of translation, the translation company, and the French version. And normally it's just, if the certificate's there, you sign off on it. But I had 5 years of high school French. So I thought, just for fun, I'm gonna check this out. And I'm just gonna read the first section. And I get 3 sentences in, and right away I go, that doesn't look right to me, based on my 5 years of French in high school. I think that's incorrect. Huh. It did come through a professional translation service. Then it dawns on me, oh, I met a guy here. We have a native French speaker in the company. I'm gonna go see him, see what he thinks. I go over there and I give him the 2 documents. Hey, I think that sentence is wrong. What do you think? He looks at it, he goes, you're right, it is wrong. What it should be is, and he said something which was different than what I thought it should be. So now we have 3 translations of the same single sentence. And it's because of dialect, right? And just native speaking versus my amateur version versus whoever actually did the translation and what part of France, if it was even France, maybe they were from a French speaking country. And there's all these different dialects and subtleties. So it gets really interesting. I went to an Italian festival here years ago, and it was really interesting. Somebody had done this great poster of of speaking Italian across Italy and down into Sicily. And as you move throughout the country, there are places you cannot, the words are just completely different. And we have elements of that here in the US. Now add that into multiple languages and multiple places, and how are you gonna get it right? So translation is just really challenging, and you really need to think about, am I doing anybody any favors by trying to translate things into the right languages here. So in terms of thinking about the content of your documents, which of these, as the process participant, would you rather be trained to? Anybody want the one on the left?
Yeah, flow
No.
charts.
But does the one on the left look like every work instruction SOP you probably have at your company? Yeah, right. We've been doing this for decades and decades, right? We have not really rethought the process of laying out documents and the content from the user's perspective. Okay, so we like to use this term these days. Too long didn't read. Okay. Less words. Why do we even need words? If they're so problematic, can we convey things better visually? Pictures, diagrams. Here's what it's supposed to look like when you're done. Here's a video, okay? Things like that. Do we need paragraphs? Are we writing a novel or are we writing instructions? Bullets, numbered lists, tables for information. I just need to know the information. I don't need you to talk about it to me in actual full words and full sentences. Just here's the requirement, as succinctly as possible. Video, I just started to mention. Voiceover on instructions. Okay. I worked at a place and they started this right as tablets became really cheap, especially the smaller tablets. And they decided to just say, well, what would happen if we just handed every production operator a tablet to run? And they just pulled up a video that said, here's how this operation goes. And they just, on an iPhone, they took video of the operation. The operators loved it because 90% of them were ESL. And it was like, now there's no words. It's just, there was a little bit of voiceover, but they understood that, but now they could see the operation being pursued. And sure enough, as they checked over the months, defects went down. Clearly understood exactly what they were supposed to be doing. Okay? I often get pushback on, well, how do you control that? Well, a video is a form of documentation. Documentation doesn't mean 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. Okay? That concept has been gone for a long time, which is why if you're following ISO 9001, they just call it documented information. Okay? There's no context to the form, to the media being used. Spreadsheets, videos, PowerPoints, websites, all of that is documentation. So you need to get out of that 8.5 by 11 thinking. Do we really need a piece of paper kind of orientation to this? Are there better ways to convey the information that would avoid all of these challenges And that would make people love our documentation and love us for producing it that way, which helps with your credibility as you're trying to get things done. And then thinking about what's in the document, okay? Making it easier to get to what's most important. So I learned something really good from a guy who ended up being the worst boss I ever had, but it's always good when you can learn one good thing. And he had me producing a document for him, a policy document. I followed our normal format. Gave it to him, and then he called me in to go over it. And he said, yeah, this looks pretty good. He goes, tell me, which section of the document do you think is going to be most important? And I said, the part where it actually gets to the policy. He goes, yeah, I agree. He goes, so why is it you don't get to that until page 6? Because what do we see every time we open a document? Purpose, scope, definitions, references, roles. We're 5 sections in and we haven't told the reader anything yet about how to do anything. All this contextual information. When what do they want? They want the next section, which is tell me the procedure. Tell me what I'm supposed to do. Okay, so why do we always put all that other stuff up front? Purpose, scope, roles, I think are important. I like purpose, right? When I open a document, am I in the right document? Scope, does this cover what I think it covers? Roles, am I in here somewhere? My title should appear. Although if my title's not in the list of roles, then I guess I don't have a role in this. I don't need to read this document. And then the next thing, right? Because I could probably do that in the first 1 or 2 pages. And then I'm into the piece that everybody really wants. Tell me what I'm supposed to do at this point. So again, write for the readers, not the auditors, okay? My next theoretical statement, remember the auditors don't work here. Just keep that in your head all the time. We're always so fearful, especially those of us who are in the regulated industries, especially FDA. We do everything thinking about the FDA. FDA does not work at your company. Yes, they are important, but they're not what drives you. Figure out what's the purpose of your company as a med device, pharmaceutical, or veterinary products company. What are you in business to do?
Serve the patients.
Serve the patients. Do no harm. Create safe and effective products. What does FDA want you to do? Same thing. Okay. So don't worry about this thing called FDA. Worry about what is it going to take for our company to produce safe and effective products. And guess what? You'll probably match up perfectly with what FDA wants you to do. And that's really how FDA approaches it. It's just tell us how you're going to do that and get ready to defend it. And you'll probably, don't worry about all the little tiny little, oh, well, the requirement, we think it says exactly this. You get to interpret the regulations and then say, this is how we are going to meet that so that we can produce safe and effective. Understand what your company's really doing and focus on that rather than, oh, an auditor or an inspector won't like that, so we better do it differently. Don't worry about that, okay? Worry about the people you're trying to figure out, look, we want you to do it this way. Don't forget to explain the why. You're doing this way because, right? And move from there. You got to get out of the fear and assumption business. What do we need to do? What's the right thing to do? Because we know the goal is a safe and effective product for the patient. Focus on that, okay? As I said, in most cases, I just did I have a new presentation on this I just did the other day about what are auditors actually looking for. And it's usually not what we think they're looking for. They want to understand your process and why you're doing it that way and what's your interpretation of how that meets the requirements. They're not trying to dictate to you how to do that. They want you to explain it. So don't focus so much on that. Focus on what the output is supposed to be here. So let's talk about examples here. How big is your quality manual at your company? Anybody have the 80 pager? Okay. 50? Online, you can weigh in here too.
We're probably around 50.
Around 50?
I mean, if you include the appendices.
Okay. Anybody got less than 30? Less than 20? Okay, so some head start and nod. Less than 10? Anybody online got one less than 10?
No, it's about 30 with appendices.
Okay. Less than 5 pages? That ain't feasible? I see shaking heads. Yeah, no, there's a lower limit, right? How many requirements does that quality manual satisfy? No, it doesn't. It's a trick question, first of all. In ISO 9001, you no longer need a quality manual. Not that you should not have one, you should. But the requirement used to be 4 requirements, which is still what's in 1345. 4 requirements. How many pages does it take to cover 4 requirements? Does it take more than 10 pages to explain 4 requirements? I think we're overthinking this. It's only 4 requirements. Right? So why do you need all those pages? Why do you need this? So I took over as head of quality organization, and right away the next week we had an audit. And of course, the first thing the auditor said, can you show me the quality manual? And I slid something like this across the table. This one happens to be 42 pages. That's pretty close to what we had. And he picked it up and he kind of did that, like the old professor thing. I'm going to weigh your paper to see if it's an A. And he looked across the table and he said, how many requirements does this satisfy? And I said 4. And he kind of looked at me, this much paper for 4? And I said, I'm new here. I just started. I'm going to take care of that. Okay?
But you have to remember, it's not just about external agency requirements. You may also have a global company requirement that you then have to satisfy, and what your global headquarters wants in the policy.
Sure. So in a global company, there's no way you could make it a small manual, correct? That would simply be an impossibility in such a complex organization, correct? There's absolutely no possibility that that could happen.
So I might be the only one that doesn't know this, but I don't know what a quality manual is supposed to achieve. Like, why would I read it? I'm in IT, so I get.
So yeah, you also touched on something about, it may not be because of the auditors. It's never about the auditors. Remember I said they don't work here. Your quality manual is first and foremost for your employees. It explains the quality system. Right? I always get asked, so the 4 requirements. You have to lay out the architecture of your quality system, explain the documentation that's going to be in there. Oh, students, what is it?
Quality policy.
No, quality policy is not actually a requirement, although I highly recommend you put it in there, because where else are you gonna put it? Oh, your process flow.
Yeah.
And I always can't remember the 4th one. Anyway, think about that. How many pages does it take to cover those kind of things? Right? Not much. So how small could it be? It seems like we have agreement you couldn't do it under 5, and I didn't get a lot of heads nodding on 10. And you said if it's a corporate, if there's a complex corporate structure, then all bets are off and it has to be big, right? Because you certainly couldn't do it in under 5. You certainly couldn't do it like, say, on 2 sides of a page. That wouldn't be reasonable at all, would it? Could it be a trifold brochure? Would this be a legitimate quality manual for a multi-division, multi-business unit corporation? I see you shaking your head, at least one. No, it couldn't possibly be. This is an actual quality manual from several companies that I've advised. And yes, it has passed all of those audits. So at that same company where I had slid across the 42 page, a year later, we got to this. And an auditor walked in and said, could I have the quality manual? And I handed him this. And he looked at it and he went, finally. Even the auditors, they're tired of looking at this. Okay, this is overkill. You got to read the 4 requirements, figure out what they are, and address them. And then you can add a couple of things in, like I love the quality policy. This one, quality policy, is right on the front page. Don't put it in a separate document. Yes, you're going to put it up on the walls, but this is great because I can hand this to every employee when they walk in the door day 1 and they can put it on their desk. How many of your employees actually know where to find the quality manual, do you think? Probably you guys, and that's it. Maybe some other people in the quality resident. And even I do this a lot, and a lot of times even the people sitting in the room don't know where their quality manual is, right? And they're responsible for it. We need to rethink this. If you're going to try to influence the masses, this is going to go over and sell your case a lot better than, hey, I have this great idea. Here, read this, I'll get you the other three later. Right, and all the appendices and, or guidance documents that go with it versus, here's everything you need to know about our quality system and what we're trying to do, boom. There are lots of places you could do that kind of thing. And I showed you the example earlier about how to lean out the content. Instead of all these paragraphs, it was a flow chart and quick explanations next to the flow chart. Okay? That document, here, let's go back to that. Oops, going the wrong way. Now, the idea here is, this is what they get to first. Everybody loves a picture. Quick explanation next to the boxes, what they are. And then there are references. If you need more detail, then you can jump to somewhere else in the document and read the text or any other diagrams you want to put in there. But typically people don't have to go past this page. Oh, that's what I need to know. I just need to know the steps. I understand that. I remember they trained us on this, but just for a reminder, if I need to, I can jump to that part of the document. Employees love this. And if you want to sell them on a change to a process, say, this is how I'm going to lay it out for you. Now they understand it. You hand them that, they go, well, they're not going to read it. And then they're going to say, I don't understand the change you're trying to implement, so I'm not with you. Right? So you're going to lose your potential allies right there. So we need to really rethink what we're doing around documentation. I do know, like I said, I've implemented this at half dozen companies, and I know people who've attended my training, they usually ask for a copy of this, and I will make that available if you'd like. And I know of at least 5 other companies that then rewrote their quality manual to be this, and are very happy with the results. So I'm happy to sell that idea out there. All right, what are you guys thinking about this? Actually, like some wide eyes. Online, did you get a good look? Well, you saw it on the slide.
I seen Bose Corporation do something very similar.
Okay, there's a good sized company doing it. Yep. So works well in small companies for sure, but yeah, this is a company, and that's what this diagram is showing us, is they have 3 business units. And it's laying out the functional structure across all 3 business units, along with shared organization as well, like quality. And then it applies across the board. This is the layout of how their processes all go together. I think I've got a picture of this later. It's got a description of manager and executive responsibility and manager representative. It's got a short list of applicable standards and regulations by business unit. Explains the quality, and there's the documentation structure. There's all the requirements met, all 4 right there, plus a couple other nice things to have. So let's rethink that. All right. So I talked earlier about this idea of how many documents should you have and how do you target them. So which is better, more big or fewer big documents or more little documents? Let's take a look at those. So fewer big documents, like an end-to-end production process. People like that. They only have to go to 1 document, right? Now, the challenge is it's a big document. So it becomes pretty daunting to the reader. Makes it, as you said, harder to find content. You could miss key elements that are buried among other multiple topics. The audience is broader, so when you go to do a review of this document, you need more people to review it, to participate in the review, which gives them more chances to miss something. Especially if you haven't laid it out in a way that's obvious. Here's the section on engineering, so the engineering knows I need to look at this. Here's the section on manufacturing. Usually it's all kind of intermixed in it. Just it follows the process, which means sometimes there's multiple functions involved. Now they got to figure out which part of this am I supposed to be reviewing and weighing in on. And then when you make a change, even a small change, you now have to retrain everybody that played a role in creating this document and plays a role in the process. The advantages, it's all in one place. They pull up one document and the whole process is there. They don't have to know how to, somebody talked about trouble getting people to even get into the EQMS system. Okay? Right now they don't, now they have to go look for other documents. This avoids that. They pull up one document, they're good to go. You know what they're gonna do though? They're gonna print it out and put it in their desk. Have their own local copy of it. So now they don't know when changes that. That's a whole other discussion. Okay. The end-to-end flow is more clear, right? Because you're covering the entire process. So if you're trying to understand the entire process, at least it's in one document. And overall, there's less documents to manage. from a doc control perspective. That all sounds good. The other approach, lots of smaller documents. So let's say like by the work cell. There's a specific document for the work cell. Now you got a lot more documents to manage. Okay, possibly hundreds versus dozens kind of thing. Readers may need to access multiple documents to get to what they need because you're covering only a small piece of the process. They get to the next part of the process or the process that comes next, and they got to go find the document for that, right? So it's a little bit harder to navigate, but you can handle that through managing better linkages in your system. If you have any QMS system, most of them can do that. And they may not, because they're only looking at one piece at a time, right? They may lose the overall context, right, of the process. The idea of not seeing the forest for the trees. The advantage is it's a lot easier to find content. I pull up a short document, boom, I know where to get my stuff, especially if it's using less words and things like tables and diagrams, I can get right to it. Okay? Because it's got a narrower scope, it's harder to misunderstand it. It's harder to miss the important aspects of it. When I make changes, the review is quicker because it's a smaller target audience. It's not this document doesn't cover every function, it maybe only covers one or two. Right, so now I only need one or two reviewers to get in there. And when I make a change, that means it's a smaller group of people that need to be trained to the change. What do you think? Which is better? Yeah, we got one vote for small. Online, any opinions? Oh, we got somebody wrote in, lots of smaller.
Well, the only thing I think it's I frequently see here is that even for the big ones or smaller ones, we need to submit for approval, right? Reviews, whatever. So how do you understand about senior leadership to review and approve procedures? Because what I suppose, as I observe here, is that most of the procedures are written, and then it is approved, and then when you go to the document, you see lots of errors, wrong informations. It's interesting because there are lots of reviewers, including senior leadership, and the errors are there. As you say here on the left, more reviewers and more chance for them to miss something. So I don't know until where it's valuable to have approvers or lots of approvers in such context.
Yeah, so on the concept of approvers, because we all know more chefs doesn't make for a better stew. And that idea that, oh, if we have lots of documents, now we have to involve CG management a lot. Well, again, if you've thought out your structure of your documentation, this is the pyramid with the layers, does upper management need to review and approve the lower level documents or just the higher level ones? Yeah, it should be, but I do see that in places where it's just everybody in the pool, right? That a QS document is changing, so executive management, you better be aware of this and sign off on it, even though it's a work instruction for a work cell that they've never seen and never going to see, that kind of thing. Okay, so it's a trick question about which is better.
Yeah, I think this
It's a hybrid approach.
But another.
Masan was first.
Yeah, but I prefer the smaller one because the stakeholders are targeted better than the bigger one. Because sometimes you are in the meeting, they say quality, but you finish by asking yourself, what am I doing in this meeting? Even though you are in quality, for example, a quality inspector, and they are talking about quality system. Yeah, I understand that you have to know as quality inspector, but sometimes in the training, you don't have anything to do with door control or those stuff. So you were lost. But if the target is precise, I think that's the best part.
Good, Scott, you were gonna say something?
I was just gonna add another advantage to the smaller documents, because you could capture what people are looking at. So if there's documentation that no one's ever referencing, maybe you don't care about it, maybe it doesn't need to be there, or when it's heavily documented. maybe
Just point to things instead of sucking
review
it into
more
the
often.
document, right? That's what happens here. With the big quality manuals, is that we often just repeat what's in the standard or the reg. We parrot it back. There's no requirement to do that. You can simply point to ISO 1345 and then do the rest of it, right? And in your procedures, you might say more specifically, here's how we address this requirement. But simply repeating back the standard does nothing, provides no value. So here, I usually push for be more hybrid in your approach. Understand the hierarchy and make sure it's clearly defined what these are at each level, okay? The red here is the quality manual itself at the top, one document, maybe some addendums or appendices that you can do as separate, like you could have the quality policy in a separate document. It's repeated here on the front, but it's, you know, covered there. This is a functional org chart. You could have the detailed org chart with people's names and titles as an addendum to the quality manual, because that changes a lot, right? I don't want to sign off on the quality manual every time somebody gets a promotion, kind of thing, or somebody changes their title. Then understanding the next level is your process documents. High level, big flow chart that just says, here's the end to end. No how, just what. This is design and development consists of 5 phases. Those 5 phases are defined as follows. If you want to learn more, you go to the procedure for phase 1. The procedure now lays out, here are the activities. Okay? And those activities are in work instructions where you get very specific and maybe very functional. Right? So now you can spread it out by functional group. That kind of approach creates this great architecture that everybody can follow. And then it sets up who are the right approvers, how do you manage the content. But what we often find is I pull up an SOP and it contains policy, procedure, work instructions. Actually, I've seen forms embedded inside the SOP. It's like, okay, that's like you're trying to create one document to cover everything. It needs to be more targeted than that. So you have to put some time into figuring out your architecture. And try it out like on one document and be amazed how happy the readers are with you. Right? Want to talk about getting people to be your allies. Fix their documents, they will love you. Were you going to say something?
Well, I was just gonna say that's great unless you have a procedure governing the structure of all of your documents and you have to follow that procedure to create the documents.
So then I would hide the vegetables. And I might, does your company have a specific category for guidance documents?
We don't even have guidance.
Okay, so maybe you just write one.
It's a very, it's an immature quality system, and
Okay.
this is a lot of what I'm
Sure.
trying to change.
Yeah.
Because right now, yeah, we do, like, we have a specification for USP water. The director of quality is signing up for that. Like.
Right, yeah. Yeah, right, why?
Well,
Why
because
is
when
that
it's a company of 30 people,
yeah,
you know, that's,
old habits die hard,
right.
right? We've
Well,
always done it that way. A lot of you
and-
mentioned that in your introduction.
Right, and then nobody has come in and said, why are you making this easy process so convoluted? Well, we have to have everything, and so.
Right, assumptions, because an auditor will hate it. That's where I go back to the auditor doesn't work here. What do we want it to do? And then we'll be ready to defend it when the
Except-
auditor shows up.
A lot of
Once a
the
year.
things about what the auditor wants is really based on past experiences, because you often end up with the same FDA auditors year after year.
Sure.
You know what they want, and you do get auditors that want everything in the very.
I often find though, that's often still anecdotal and mythological in cases. It's a misinterpretation of what they thought the auditor or the inspector in this case is saying to them. And now it's become gospel.
Oh, no.
And if you were to sit them back down and go, hey, I know years ago we maybe interpreted something you said like this, but here's what we've decided to go, is this really what you're looking for? A lot of times you'll find them going, yeah.
I had an auditor tell us that we had too many diagrams and not enough words.
Oh, okay, well, there's always that. You do run into that every once in a while. That's what you gotta be prepared for and go, but look, since we went to that, you have metrics that show
Right.
process deviations are down.
Right.
because they understand the process better now. Right? They love data,
Yeah,
right? Especially FDA inspector. Anyway, so yeah, you need to think about this balance, how to get this stuff in there. But communication to the masses is a big part of how you're gonna win over, right, your allies, the people that you want to have go with you and that you want to influence. So really think about how you're constructing that documentation. All right, we had our discussion here, I think we're good.
so I was
Yeah,
going
go
to
ahead.
say that I often find that the case when you get these extremely long SOPs, it's to make up for the lack of adequate training. And so they want to prescribe every step that is taken because they don't either want to invest the time into the people or they don't have the trust for their people to apply quality
Sure.
concepts unless it's every situation is
Yeah.
prescribed.
That's because they're blaming the people,
Correct.
right? And problems with the process are not about the people.
Right, but when you have a
Heretical
system
thought
that's,
number 4.
but when you have a system that's based on people and not based on process, that's the corner you paint yourself
Yeah.
into. And so then trying to
So
change.
how often is root cause listed as in
Human error.
human error and then insufficient training?
Yeah.
Okay. How about that the process is untrainable?
Right. Or there is no training for the process.
Well, yeah, well, that's because training's not a requirement. Heretical thought number 4.
But the CFR does say well-trained, qualified personnel.
As part of competency, it's a possible aspect of competency. The requirement is to establish or to demonstrate competency, not to demonstrate training. Training is one possible method of demonstrating
Right.
competency, but it's not a requirement.
One,
There are a lot of articles about this, about how every EQMS contains a training management module. How many of them contain a competency management module? Yet there's no actual requirement for training management in procedure, in the standards and the regulations. Somebody online is gonna say something?
one of the things that we do in lean manufacturing is we train people on process steps, and those procedures are then tied to that process step. So when you look at the big training board, it's based on a process, not the procedure, which makes it more effective and worrying about the documents versus the hands-on, and it's demonstrated by their competency.
Yeah, that's right, because it's the process has to produce the right outcomes. It's not about does the process have the right documents. Because we all know there's examples of really well-defined documented processes that produce crap. Right? Think about the process. Good, all right, I think we got the right mindset here today, but probably a lot to consider. All right, a little bit behind, but we're doing well. All right, so let's move on to the habits, okay? I like this quote by Will Durant, right? We are what we repeatedly do. So excellence is an act, it's not an act, but a habit. Right? And that's what this section is about, is how do you start getting your mindset in the right place, and then that should hopefully encourage others to do the same. By the way, this quote is often attributed to people like Plato. So another one of those misquotes that happens a lot, but it's actually Will Durant. All right, so leading without authority, right? Really what we're here for. So you always have to remember, leaders don't have to be elected or chosen. There's lots of format for leaders. Typically, leaders get followed because they act, the habits they demonstrate. People kind of admire that and they're attracted to that. Doesn't matter whether you've got a VP title or a manager title or whatever you think conveys power or authority. That's not really what makes people follow leaders. Because we know lots of people with those titles who are horrible leaders, I'm sure. Probably all have horror stories there, right? But then I know lots of people with no title really at all that everybody listens to. And everybody will do what they say, okay? It's something that evolves over time. So it does require some patience. But you can be a leader through things like thought leadership. You're the one who always thinks this through the right way. And people go, wow, yeah, let's run this by so-and-so because they're going to understand the nuances better. They're technical or SME, subject matter experts. Well, yeah, let's go ask the person who understands this best. Okay? The trendsetter is the person who just always seems to be heading in a new direction and it works. okay? People who like to coach, they don't just head off in their own direction, but they take people with them and they help them understand how to do it and they teach them how to do it. And then the bridge builders. You go to this person, they won't know the answer, but they'll know who does. And they'll get us connected so that we can solve our problems. Those are all forms of leadership that don't require a title at all. I got this coaching early on, and not early on, but at some point in my career, hadn't gotten my first management assignment, and that in my head was what I needed to do. They would just put me in charge of the department. Look at what I'd be able to do, right? I just need that manager title and I can make things happen. And I was having a performance review with my manager at the time, and I was expressing my frustration that I wasn't moving up to the manager level. And at first he said, well, you'll get there. You've got the right, abilities to do that. He goes, but in the meantime, what are you worried about? I said, because I want to get things done. And he said, what do you think you haven't gotten done? He said, look at the things you've managed to accomplish at this company. And he started to rattle off things that I didn't even realize he'd noticed. When he got done, I kind of went, oh, I have gotten a lot done, haven't I? Because yeah, this is when I was doing CAD stuff, because you have influenced the use of engineering automation tools across 18 departments in 3 different business units, all without a management title. Don't you think that makes you a leader? When people have questions about that, who do you think's name comes to mind? Because it's yours. You're already leading. Right? That was like quick slap and oh my God, I got to rethink about this. Right? That kind of stuff. So one of those moments in the career, like huge shift in thinking. So yeah, don't get so focused on the title. Right? And a lot of times we got to be careful because some people chase the titles for the wrong reason. More power, more money. Right? Just remember, the higher up you go, the easier it is to get fired. You will learn that lesson as you move up. So just remember, right? You can lead right from below easily. It's about the habits you have and how you exhibit them and how you help others develop those same habits. All right, so I mentioned this is based on Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Anybody read this? Anybody online read this? Oh, you guys should read this book. It's still out there. It was on the New York Times bestseller list for like a long time. It's not anymore, but 25 million copies sold, 40 languages it's been translated into. The Time magazine listing it as the 25 most influential business management book was just like 3 years ago that they said that. The book was written back in the 90s. It's still really relevant. He's dead, unfortunately. His videos are awesome, but he really understood how to get things done. So it's an easy read. Then there's all kinds of classes you can take. You can shave your head and get the tattoo, and you don't have to do that. The book is easy enough to understand. He has other versions of it. I got my kids the copy of the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens, which I thought was eye-opening for them, which he wrote with his son. And then he's got other versions of it as well. So, but the main book is The Highly Effective People. So he came up with this model with these maturity stages that we go through, where we go from being dependent on people to trying to be independent to learning that we really need to be interdependent. And to get there, he came up with the 7 habits, where you start with focusing on what he called the private victory, right? How do I succeed? Through things like being proactive, always beginning with the end in mind, focusing on first things first, right? And then moving up to where I recognize I want to do greater good. It's a public victory that I'm trying to achieve. And I will achieve victory through that, but I should be focusing on the public good. And I do that by making sure I first understand before I try to be understood. I create a win-win. That's my approach to everything. I find synergies. How do I bring disparate groups together into the same thinking? And then lastly, I keep learning. I sharpen what he called sharpening the saw. That I stay sharp and I stay on top of these things. And that was his approach. So I was sitting there one day, I was thinking, I love this book, I love this approach. And I thought, I wonder if you could be more specific to other things in my life around this. And actually the first one I did was on project management. Those are some project management. So I have a version of this for project management. But then as I got more into my quality career, I thought, is there something we could do more specific to quality leadership? And I came up with this. So I borrowed on his structure and then I built off of this. And did the same kind of thing where I said, well, as quality leaders, we often go through trying to control first, control quality. Then we learn how to manage quality, subtly different, and then we lead. Okay, and it's the same thing, it's between individual success, trying to mature to where I get organizational success. And I'm gonna cover each of these individual habits as we go. But on the individual success side, right, that usually looks like I'm really focused on personal perception of me. It's very egocentric. My stakeholders, my management, my team members, I see them as customers who have demands to be met. And ultimately, I want to feel like people see me and I feel like a good leader. It's about me. Me. And like I said, it's more egocentric. And that's where habits 1 through 3 come in. Then, as I want to get to maturing to the organizational success approach, now I start seeing my stakeholders, management, and team members as my partners, right? And we all have common objectives to share. I can use the QMS as a value provider rather than a necessary evil, right? And I don't care about it, but I'm now automatically viewed as a leader. Perception is, oh, that guy's a good leader. Right? Regardless of my title or anything else, I've created that perception of being a good leader. And from a quality work perspective, now we're respected, not feared. We'll talk more about that. Because we know that happens, and I heard some of that during introductions. And I talked about it in some of the other areas, right? Oh, quality's here, joy. Kind of thing like that. All right. Oh, and that's habits 4 through 6, and then I'll add on 7. All right. So in terms of that controlling stage, this is often when we're trying to avoid variance. Deviations are bad. Anybody work in an organization where your head of quality said we don't deviate here? That's bad. Deviations are a good thing. They are a natural part of a quality management system. You have to learn how to manage them correctly, interpret them, and then minimize them. I've been in organizations where I've asked that of a VP of quality, tell me about your deviation process. We don't deviate here. And then I get the rain on their parade and I said, well, then it actually means you do, just that nobody's telling you. Because people got stuff they got to get done. When the process doesn't work, you've given them no way to deal with that. They know that they can't just run the process the way it's written because it's going to produce the wrong output. Or at worst, they do that because you've told them don't ever deviate, so keep producing bad output. Or they figure out how to get around it and produce the right output, but now they're not telling you that there was a deviation involved. You're just oblivious to that, right? So that's what happens there. We tend to be more reactive than proactive. We're great firefighters. We love playing whack-a-mole. Problem. Problem is sometimes we get rewarded for that. People get rewarded all the time because they're great. We had this emergency and that guy knocked it right out, or she got rid of that problem for us. The next time the problem comes up, then give it to Jane again, because she's really good at tackling those fires. Right? Nobody's asking the question, why are we having fires? Why is the boat leaking? That kind of thing. And the quality organization or the police. Don't go ask quality, they just are going to say no. And if you see them, hide everything, right? Scatter. We got hired by a place to go in and do an organizational assessment, kind of like an audit, but more looking at how they do things. And they were taking us around the building and we walked into a production area and suddenly it was break time. That told us a lot about how the organizational culture. Nobody wanted to be in that room with us. And they didn't want to see active work going on. That was interesting. Your metrics tend to be on things really more important to the business. Cycle time, costs, right? Because failures cause delays. So that should tell us everything we need to know. Things are taking too long, then we must be failing somewhere. Get back to whether or not the process isn't good. And the quality manager is going to be held responsible, or at least that's what I believe if I'm the quality manager. And I don't want to get fired. So I better manage variance really well. I better be really good at putting out fires. Right? I'm very focused on reacting and being good at it. When you get to that managing stage, it changes a bit. Now we're focused on well-defined deliverables, outcomes. There are product characteristics we're trying to meet. Cost of quality, somebody mentioned, trying to keep the cost, particularly the cost of poor quality down. And customers need to be satisfied. They need to be happy, right, that they got their stuff on time and it met their requirements for characteristics. Okay, so we're understanding what the deliverables are. Planning now includes measurable quality objectives. We understand the difference between good and bad and actually how to quantify that. We're not just reacting to things. And now as a quality manager, I hold myself responsible or accountable for this. I'm going to act like it all depends on me. I'm going to internalize this. Before I was assuming everybody thought it was my problem. Now I'm going to make it mine. If nobody else is going to take care of it, I'm going to take care of it. But I'm managing, I'm planning. Managing implies that there's planning and I follow the plan and I evaluate and then I come back and I make adjustments and I continue to manage. But at the leadership stage, now it's not just about the deliverable, but what are the results I'm trying to achieve? The performance of the process. Not just that it produced a widget this size and this weight and met all the characteristics, but how did I get there? How well did it perform that? How much scrap did I have? How much rework did I have? Moving from customer satisfaction to customer experience. Okay, the customer ordered 1,000 widgets on time. We delivered 1,000 widgets on time. But they hated the invoice. They hated the billing process. They hated the ordering process. Their experience is horrible, but yeah, they're satisfied because they got what they ordered. Not the same things, right? And the product performance. Not just that it meets the characteristics, but I understand why is it this dimension? Why does it have rounded edges? Why does it have these workmanship requirements? What is its purpose? And does it perform as needed? Because the requirements could be wrong. Customers often ask for the wrong thing. If you understand what they're doing, back to the why does it have to be this way? Everybody familiar with PDCA? Plan, do, check, act. Okay? That's everything in quality system standards. I don't care which standard you apply to, that's what's at its core. It's PDCA. Okay? So at the maturity stage, you are making sure that that cycle actually exists in the quality system. And that you're moving from continual to truly continuous improvement. Those sound like synonyms. They often get used a lot, and there's often debate which one's which, but Steve's definitions, okay? Bless you. Continual means periodic. It's like a stair-step function. I make change, I go for a while, I make another change, right? I keep improving continually. Continuous, I'm always striving, I'm always making it every day. Something gets better. Okay? By the way, that's Joanne. So that was his teaching. And ultimately, I get this quality organization to be seen as a trusted guide. Yeah, we should definitely go ask quality about it. They'll help us understand this, rather than they'll say no. We want to be sought out rather than avoided. By the way, I talked about food as a motivator. When I was the head of quality and I wanted to encourage people to show up in my office and talk to me, jar of candy. Right on the head corner of my desk. Everybody stops in to get one of Steve's Hershey bars. And then we can talk. We can learn, see what's going on, develop that camaraderie, get them to be allies. Right? It's subtle things you can do to entice them. And now, habit 7, which is continually learning, right, sharpening that saw, right, means you'll have continued ability to lead, because what you know today is going to be wrong tomorrow. It's going to change. Entropy is real, right? Everything varies over time. So you better stay on top. Like being here, right, helps with that. All right, so let's look at those first 3 habits, okay? I'm going to go into each one, but habit 1 is about seeing it as a system. And I talked earlier about the process model. Right, understanding how your quality system is tied together and how it works. We'll talk about that. Habit 2 about all hands on deck, right? Quality isn't just quality's problem. That's often a cultural issue. And then habit 3, we talked earlier about, right, not just collecting data, but doing something with it. Right, so let's talk about those. So it's a system. There's a reason why we call it a quality system. That's the key word, quality management system. It's not just a pile of functions or activities. It's supposed to be an interconnected system. Everything ties together. Okay? You have to be able to see the complete picture of what the connections are. And this isn't a surprise or something I figured out. It's in the standard. It tells you this when they talk about this thing called the process approach, that this is exactly what they want. And the FDA regulations, if that's what governs you, all throughout, they talk about interconnected processes. They're telling you, you've got to see it as a system. Okay? So when you create your quality manual, okay, there is this great picture in ISO 9001 of a process model, which everybody copies and pastes to show that, yes, we have a process model. That's not the point. Okay? You're not supposed to just grab the one in 9001. It's an example. They want you to show what yours looks like. Okay? Because it's a roadmap. Again, remember who the quality manual is for. It's for your employees, not for the auditors. It's the roadmap. It's not just a picture, go, oh, yep, process model diagram, check. Okay, checklist mentality's got to go. That's one of the things you can try to undermine. Okay, you want to show connections to procedures and guide people through the quality system so they understand the process flows. This is that picture. How many of you have this in your quality manual? How many of you have the old outdated one from years back? This is from 9001, 2015. There was a different view that was actually not in 9001. It was in ISO 9000, the glossary document. It was a little different. And I find too often that picture is still in everybody's quality manual. This is the new one. Doesn't matter. I don't want to see this one in your quality manual either if I come in. Because this tells me nothing. It tells me you knew where the diagram was in 9001. Doesn't tell me what you're doing as a company. That's what you see inside this brochure. Show me your picture of how your processes are tied together. How do you match them up to the process categories in the standard or in the reg? Okay. This one uses terminology from both 1345 and 9001. Because this organization had to certify both. So we were able to create a quality process model that covered both equally. Because they're both based on PDCA. So how difficult could it be to make them show the same thing? Any of you work in organizations that have two masters, 9001 and 1345? Anybody online? No?
I have one customer that has both. It's painful.
Two separate quality manuals?
No, it's combined.
Oh, good, okay, because I find that a lot. I don't know if you see that in other places, but I run into that a lot when they have to follow both and they create two separate quality systems. The tables of contents are different, concepts are identical. You don't need two separate quality systems, as I showed here. This is one of the things I did for this company. This is Pelican Products, I used to work for them. And they were doing that. There were separate quality systems. I said, you don't need two. You only need one. I went, what? I showed them this. Oh, okay, we can do that. All right. What could make this diagram even more useful? We're talking about we need to show the interconnections. I'm not showing the connections between the individual boxes. At this company, we didn't get that far yet. At another company where I did the same thing, we had the ability to dive in deeper. You could click, this was actually a web page, and you could click on that box and then see how those connected. Popped out a new diagram. So we had mapped every connection. And actually, it was cool. Then if you clicked on any one box, it would pop out all of the documents and show how they were connected. SOPs, work instructions, forms, templates, and guidance documents. They're all connected in a diagram. You could traverse the entire quality system as a user. That's the idea of a process approach, is understanding those connections. Otherwise, it's just a pile of parts. That tells you nothing. This is the concept diagram. Now apply the concept to your organization. All right. More about tools. Are basic flowcharts the only way to show interconnections? Everybody knows how to do a flow chart, right? One of the easiest quality tools to learn. Do you know it was a quality tool? It is one of the basic 7. Okay. When you look at a flow chart, are you assuming that the arrows are showing the inputs and outputs? Outputs from one activity becomes an input to the next. Generally, that's what we tend to think of. Is that true? Is that actually what's happening? Maybe, maybe not. And that's what gets lost when we just do simple block diagram flowcharts. There may be other types of connections. Certainly there are inputs and outputs, but there's things like controls and mechanisms. Okay? And we need to be really clear about what those are. Inputs. Inputs are the things that get transformed by the activity into an output. The outputs are what get produced from the inputs. Controls are the conditions that are needed to ensure that the activity can produce a correct output. And the mechanisms are the means by which it does that work. So oftentimes when I see people try to do this kind of thinking, and I go, what's one of the inputs to the process? And they'll say, oh, the procedure is an input. And then I'll ask, why? What does the procedure get converted into? Nothing. Okay, then it's not an input, because an input has to get converted into something. An output. What is the procedure in that list? It's a control. Wouldn't it be nice to understand that relationship and not make an assumption that it's an input? Because then I'll treat it incorrectly. Okay? All right. So these kind of things, SOPs, fixtures, templates, checklists, okay, they are not likely to be inputs. They might be outputs. Because the goal of the process activity might be to produce like a checklist. Okay, so that's possible. But I'd like to see that, understand it, because then that checklist becomes an output from this process, might become the mechanism for the next process. Not an input, a mechanism. Right? So understanding that, because they can play multiple roles and they can change as they go. All right, so great. That all sounds wonderful, Steve. How do you show that on a flow chart? Right? Well, it turns out there is a way to do this. In steps the government, mainly the Department of Defense. They have a set of modeling processes or languages called IDEF, Integrated Definition Models or Methods, that they developed in the 70s. And IDEF 0 is called functional modeling, where basically where the arrow connects to the box tells you its purpose. And it's basically defined like this. Inputs come in from the left, outputs go out to the right, controls come from the top, mechanisms from the bottom. And so then when you build a flow chart, right, now the direction of the arrows tells you not something more. I've done this where I then color code. Somebody talked about doing a spaghetti diagram. I did one of these for an organization where I color coded it. And what I did was I made, anything that was done on paper in red. And they were surprised how red the diagram was. Which got us the approval to change the process. And then when we got done, I gave them the same diagram back and there was hardly any red. Management saw we had improved the process because we'd automated everything. And then we had metrics to show how much faster it got, less error. But this is another approach to doing your flowcharts. Give it a try. By the way, if you use Visio, Visio has IDEF 0 templates built in. Has all this stuff, and it has more. Typical government fashion, there's overkill here. Right? There's all kinds of stuff. You could do some basic, just where do the arrows connect in, and you will learn so much more about your processes. And therefore be able to communicate them much more better to the people you're trying to influence. Right? Remember, you're trying to create understanding and buy-in. This type of diagram will give them that information so that they feel more comfortable with the concept. All right, any questions on seeing it as a system? You got to see all the connection. It's hard. Does anybody remember when 9001 changed in the year 2000? And it went from the functional view to the process model? Blew everybody's mind. Blew mine. I didn't understand. I hated it when I first saw it. I went through training. I'm like, this is stupid. This is too hard to understand. It was really easy to understand before. You just had all these individual activities. I understood each one. Now you want me to see the whole thing at once? Yeah, that's what it said. Over time, I figured out how to do that and realized, oh, that's absolutely the right way to get results out of this. All right, so let's talk about it being all hands on deck. So again, quality shouldn't just be the quality organization's responsibility. Right? Procedures aren't going to do it for you. You could write all the greatest procedures in the world and it won't matter if nobody engages in it. Right? You need to get employees to engage. That's how you create, when we talk about a culture of quality, that's what we're talking about. A culture of quality doesn't mean we don't allow deviations and we don't make mistakes, right? And we only do what's written down. It's we understand the system. We understand the intent of the system, the why, right? That's what you need to build in. Procedures might tell you the steps to follow, but does it explain why they're following the steps? Where are you going to teach people that? That's competence rather than training. I can train you on each step so that you know what steps to perform, but you're not competent until I tell you why you're doing it that way. So I'll give an example here. So at an operation, we had a horrible first yield rate. 34% first yield pass. Think about that for a second. 34%, that's all the good product we could produce. Think of all the rework and scrap that comes out of that. So we're trying to figure out what's going wrong in the process. We're trying to observe, are they following the procedures? Is the procedure clear? It all looks really clear. And what is, they're building insulator inserts for temperature control packaging. Got these things that are called vacuum insulator panels, which are really highly efficient insulators. And they got to tape them together to create a box. But then we put things like drugs and tissue samples in there. Air is the enemy. So you can't have gaps when you put the panels together. If there's an opening, air loves to conduct thermal energy, right? So you don't want that. So procedure says, here's how you produce a tight box. And we even tell them the goal is nothing more than 3 millimeters in terms of gaps. And we give them a tool to check that. Okay? And yet we only get 34% good product out every time they build them. So it dawns on me to go talk to the operators and ask them, do you know what you're building? A box. Great. Do you know what the box does? I think it's some sort of insulator. Okay, we're close. Okay. Do you know what it insulates? No. Okay, now we're going to educate them on what our clients do with the boxes. They ship drugs like insulin and tissue samples, things that have to get there at the right temperature. Otherwise, people get hurt, they die. The drug's not usable. Oh, wow, that's really important then. Yes. Okay. Do you know why the 3 millimeter gap is requirements there? Nope. I assume it has something to do with the thermal, the insulation. Yes. And we explain, because every millimeter of gap reduces the ability of the product to maintain temperature by 10%. Right? So every millimeter knocks down the duration by 10%. That's a lot. Light bulb starts going on. Oh, yeah. So it's really important to get those gaps down, isn't it? Yes. Okay. Now I step back and I go to see what happens now that they understand why, what they're doing. What do you think happened?
You were aiming for 3 millimeters or aiming for 0?
They were, and then what happened in terms of our, what do you think happened with our first pass yields?
80%?
I could only wish. All right, it went up to 57.
All right.
Okay, that's huge. It's a huge step, but it's still horrible, right? Nearly half of the product is still bad, right? But it just shows you the power of creating competency and engagement in the process. That just through their awareness and desire to do a better job now, they could have a huge impact. So back to something I said earlier, so then what was actually the problem?
I didn't know how to use a tool to measure the gap.
Nope.
They didn't know what they were trying to aim for, what they were doing.
No, I already explained that to them, what they were doing.
The big picture? Oh, why was only 56?
Yeah, why has it only gotten up to 57%? Why can't we get any further than that? Remember, it's not the, it's the process. We've got as far as we can with people. We're now sure they're competent and well-trained and aware. The process sucks. And we had to do more digging, and then eventually we figured out there was a problem with the process itself. Didn't matter how hard they tried, how hard they strapped the tape around that thing, to the point of actually breaking the panels instead of getting them to stay close. we had built in the high probability of there being a gap in the way we design the product. That's a whole bunch of detail we can get into, but it was pretty fascinating. It took us a long time, and it was a good lesson in root cause, because of course we were looking at that part of the process where they were scrapping things together to see where the opportunity to improve the process was. And we couldn't find anything wrong with it until finally one of my very smart quality techs said, we're looking at the wrong part of the process. It's actually at the beginning of the process, where we first get the panels ready. We're giving them crap panels. They're not going to be able to assemble them unless they happen to get a bunch of panels that are perfect. And we're not allowing for perfect. That's a whole good lesson in root cause. Anyway, it's a whole nother talk. All right. So you need to get people in training, and that's what I just talked about, right? Not just how to do the work, that's what we often focus on. The why is really important, the context of all of this. All right, so in terms of getting everybody on board, sometimes it's not. When you're trying to influence change and influence organizations, there is this kind of bell curve that happens for any sort of organizational change. Okay? And typically you find these kind of 4 groups emerge. You have your early adopters, the people who just, yeah, great idea, Steve. We're with you. We're going to jump right in. We'll help. What do you need us to do? Right? You need these people, right? They're going to be important to your cause. Then there's the followers. They're not going to be hard to convince, but they have to be convinced. But your early adopters will help you with that. If you have early adopters in enough places, somebody kind of alluded to that earlier. If I have somebody as my ally inside another organization, they become my voice there, right? And they help sell their cohorts, right? Their colleagues on the idea, and then they're okay, right? And hopefully that is a big group, that solves a lot of your problems. Then you get to the harder ones. You got your resistors. We talked about all those fears. Okay? They've got all kinds of issues with what you're trying to do, all kinds of excuses for why it's a bad idea, and it's going to take quite a bit of time, okay, to get them over. So you've got to recognize where are those people, who are they, and then think about what am I going to be my strategies. The first two, like the first one's easy, right? The no-brainer. The second one is going to come pretty easily. Resistors is where it's going to get difficult. And then the ugly truth. There is going to be that small group of diehards. They're not going. They're never going to say yes. They hate your idea. They may even try to undermine you. They're the enemy in our terms of guerrilla warfare. Okay? This is who we're actually going to be up against. So as I said, you focus first on your early adopters and your followers. You're going to get the majority of your organization on there right now, right? Early on. Once you've got your early adopters and your followers on board, they can continue to provide influence to these guys. They're out there continually delivering that message for you, right? And over time, they will start to wear these people down, or hopefully allay their fears, find out where their concerns are. You can adjust your strategy, right? So they bring you information back and how you remember you have to adapt, overcome, right? It helps you find those things. So you've got this nice iterative process going. Your diehards. First thought is, you don't even worry about them. If you know who they are, just know they're going to die. They're not going with you. It's ugly. We're Minnesotans. We like to be nice, right? We like to be kind. That's a hard message, but they're there, and you can end up spending a lot of resources on them, and it's not going to change a thing. So sometimes you just need to move forward without them. Except, okay, if they're in a position of authority, okay, or they're dangerous to your efforts. Then, of course, you got to figure out, how am I going to neutralize them in some way?
Our most influential people are the diehards.
Yeah, that could be a challenge. So what can happen, again, you got to be patient. You still want to focus here more than anything else, get these people on board. The more you get those percentages to go up, if you can get that groundswell, get them to take those risks with you, eventually these people are going, the wave is coming and I can't stop it. Now, they may not be happy about that, but at some point, if it becomes inevitable, because there's a wave, the wave's coming, and it's going to hit them no matter what. A lot of times, suddenly they'll try to save face, and I'm on board. I've always been on board, you know, but it takes time. When you get the true diehard who's not getting out of the way, they're going to stop you. They have all the power to do it. That's when you update the resume. And you go, I'm not gonna be able to do anything here. Sometimes you just have to figure out, I'm gonna die on this hill. And there's not much, but I've found more often than not, eventually, these people are very ego driven and they don't wanna look bad. And as long as they're not my direct boss and can't fire me directly, then I have some opportunity to create this, somebody, I think you talked about making it uncomfortable.
Yeah.
To the point where they just gotta go, I have no choice anymore. I'm
So
gonna look like an idiot if I continue to push back.
The old Life cereal commercial with Mikey, that was basically one of our guys, and we got him to become one of the early adopters, and it changed this project.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get one on the
So,
split
yeah.
finally, right, then suddenly you can, so. Again, if they're the run of the mill diehards, that, you know, like my copier lady. Everybody loved her, I liked her, she was great, there was no way she was coming along for the ride. I couldn't do anything about that. I did try to get her some training, I spent a little bit of effort on it, but ultimately, me and my boss just went, she isn't coming for the ride. Just keep going, don't let that slow down progress you're making, keep automating, keep doing what you gotta do. Eventually she'll get the message, or we'll have to give her the message. It's tough sometimes to be a leader, so be careful about wanting to be a leader. Sometimes, right, the decision making is ugly, but you gotta be ready for that. All right, change management elements. So there are certain things you can do, or there are characteristics. So there are several characteristics that can drive things. So you have to have a good vision. I talked about this earlier, right? People have to understand what is it you see us going towards. Right? Clear understanding of where they will end up and how will we know that we've succeeded? What does the future look like, okay, when we get there? There's got to be incentive. People want to know what's in it for them, right? So there better be something that helps them embrace that vision because they understand why it's necessary. Both for themselves, don't ever forget that individuals like to be rewarded as well as why it's good for the organization. Not everybody gets that value as much, but ultimately they have to understand this is who pays the bills, right? Who pays our salaries. And so what's good for the company is good for us. Data, right? You've got to have good data. Somebody talked about, once they were able to show people the data, it became really clear. If you don't have good information, good data to share, then it's all anecdotal, it's an opinion, as we saw in the quotes earlier, right? You're just somebody with an opinion. Competence. You need to assure the people that we're gonna make sure they can do this. If they don't already have it, we're gonna get to the training on Six Sigma, right? We're gonna get you through the belting process or whatever, right? Or we're gonna help you understand this new concept. We're gonna train you on the new system, whatever it is. Here's our plan for getting you the competence you're gonna need to succeed so that you'll support the vision. Priorities, especially if it's a big initiative. Yes, the elephant's huge. We're gonna take this bite first, right? We have a plan, right? We know what the Gantt chart looks like, right? We know how we're gonna get there. We know what we're gonna measure along the way, right? We're gonna keep checking that data, right? And keep moving it forward. We know what that process looks like. Here's point A, here's point B, that's the vision. As I said, one of the fears could be, I don't understand the pathway. So you better have that figured out. Be able to explain to them, this is what the activities will look like. And who's doing what? And do we have all the right people now, or do we need more? Management might want to know that. Well, wait, can we actually get this done with who we have, or are you saying we're gonna go hire a bunch of expensive consultants or something? Right? How are you gonna make that happen? You have the right people. And then project management skills come in, you have to execute. You got a plan, got to follow the plan, and somebody's got to be able to manage that well. And then lastly, when it's all done, how are you going to know that you succeeded? What is validation going to look like? Because it's great to get the project done, that's not the same as succeeding. Right? Completion and success are not the same things. Too often I see that, I review people's plans for projects. What's the project objective? And essentially it says to get it done. Okay, that's not an objective. That's just a given. If I undertake a project, the point is to get it done. What is it going to produce in terms of results? Incentive there. So, all right, why do I have all this long wording? Because it works out well like this. This shows what happens if you miss even one of those elements. I'm not gonna go through the whole chart, but you'll have this, right? Ideally, all of them are there and that's success. But if you leave something out, like you leave competence out, you create anxiety in the organization. If you leave out resources, then we're gonna be frustrated because it's not gonna get done. But you can see how those match up. So being a leader means you gotta make sure all of that happens. That's gotta be part of your strategizing. How am I gonna make sure that each of these things is addressed? Because like I said, if you leave off any one of them, then something's gonna go wrong. All right, so there's Mr. Deming in his early days, in his younger days. We always see old pictures of Deming. Maybe because you're supposed to look wiser when he's gray and bald, and I thought he looked pretty wise there. All right, so he had this great, quote in one of his books, right, about the idea of why do we collect data, and I talked about that earlier. Again, it's not a checklist activity. Oh yeah, we're supposed to monitor this process, so we've got data that we collect. And that's all we do. We collect the data because we're supposed to collect the data. It's kind of pointless and not really value added if all you do is do it for the sake of collecting it. You're trying to analyze that data. You're getting that data for a purpose, which will then tell you what data do you need and how, right? Remember test method validation? Are we getting it in the right way? You're trying to show trending because you want to prevent. Remember, we were talking about being reactive. Okay, if I'm looking at my data to find out when I go outside the bounds and then I whack them all, right, to fight the fire, that's reactive. I want to see when the trend is in the wrong direction and go, how do I bring it back down? That's the point of collecting good data. Not to tell me when an alarm went off. By the time the alarm goes off, it's too late. Right? I want to avoid the alarm in the first place. So collecting data is meaningless unless you know what the goal is. Why do I need that data? Okay, and again, what does good look like? And what does bad look like, both in quantitative terms? Because obviously I want to maximize this and minimize that. But if my data is not going to support that, then it's pointless. Why bother? You're wasting resources. But we're good on the first path, first three. All right, next three habits. All right, so it talks about focusing on requirements, and habit 5 is about plan, do, check, act. And then habit 6 is about how do you talk to management in their language. Kind of touched on that earlier. All right, requirements. Everybody ever seen this version, this cartoon? There comes in lots of varieties, right? The idea of how requirements are misunderstood and we end up producing the wrong thing. Okay. If you don't exactly understand the requirements, then the results are not going to be good. Right? What that implies is that everything's measurable, not just sort of vague. Oh, the system has to be faster. Okay, that doesn't tell me anything. It needs to be easy to use. And whenever I do IT projects, that's always requirement number 1. It has to be easy to use. How will we know that? How will we measure that? Because otherwise we're going to end up in the wrong place. What I think is easy to use is going to be different what you think is easy to use versus what you think easy to use is. Right? So we need to think about how do we measure that stuff. It's more than just documenting the requirements. Everybody usually goes through, oh yeah, we got a requirements document, we listed them all out. Okay, did you test them? Remember the scientific method? When you write down those requirements, they're sort of like hypothesizing what we need. Have we confirmed that they're actually correct, actually measurable, actually doing the right thing? So you need to understand, are they the valid requirements? Are they clear enough for people downstream to use? Are they measurable? Are they compatible or will they conflict? And are there enough of them to meet the goal, the ultimate goal? Remember, you better know what the ultimate goal is, otherwise why are you gathering requirements? You have to see the bigger picture. Remember that the standards and the regs are your minimum requirements. They're not the end. They're the bar you can't go below. That seems like an obvious statement, but too often that's what I see built into people's quality system. What does the standard say we have to do? That's what we do. We don't ever try to go above that or beyond that, even if it's good for us. Right? It's just, yep, checklist, right? We check everything off, we meet the requirements. Why would we ever want to do anything more than that?
Question.
Yep.
Can you give us a specific example of how we can go beyond the standard and regulation?
Yeah, so just having this discussion the other day. So when we're writing all these procedures, we're gonna manage them over time. Periodically, they're gonna get updated. Every once in a while, I'll go into an organization and I'll find a procedure that was written 12 years ago and then never touched again. And I'll ask, when was the last time you reviewed this procedure? And they'll say, when it was released 12 years ago. And I go, don't you have something in your process to do periodic reviews? No. Where does it say I have to do this? It doesn't. It does say, though, essentially that procedures need to be accurate. Over time, you know things are going to change. How are you going to make sure they stay relevant and correct? Well, common practice is you build in like a every 2-year, every 3-year periodic review of procedures. Even if they've not been updated, you still do a review. Go, is this still right? Is this actually what we're doing? It's not in the standards of the regs anywhere. It's the right practice. It goes above and beyond. Thank you. Yep. All right. And as I was talking about before, don't just parrot back the standards and the regs. Reg says thou shalt have a procedure for, and you go, yep, we have a procedure for that. We're good. Okay. How are you interpreting that requirement? Okay. Behind that, you have to think about the why. Why does the reg or the standard say that as a requirement? What's its intent? Okay. Then, now that I understand why they included that requirement, now I can figure out then what should we be doing about it? How do you understand what the writers of the standards and the regs intended? Do we know? Wouldn't it be nice if they told us? There are guidance documents. And even the FDA explains itself in what's called the preamble. Every time when they put out like 21 CFR Part 820, the med device regulation, there is the short version you get, which today is like 20 pages or something like that. Then there's the bigger version of it that's like 180 pages. And what's in front of it is called the preamble, where they took all of the feedback they got from the public, every question, and they answer every question and explain why they did or did not take the advice. There's your explanation. So if you're ever trying to figure out why does FDA write that requirement that way, go to the preamble and look at the section where all the questions are asked about that requirement, and there will be FDA's thinking. It's there. It's out there for you.
So can I bring up something about standards and regs?
Mm-hmm.
So I went to a conference where they were talking about safety and security. And it was kind of along the lines of, there's like a compliance line that they're trying to reach. And this guy from Disney came out and said, don't think about those kind of lines. You know, think about it in terms of like reputation. So your reputation as a company, do you want it to be right at the line? Or do you want it to be as high as possible?
Right, and that's what I'm talking about, right? Is you get too focused on the checklist mentality, which is like, just gotta get here and check it off, right? Is that really what you need as a business, where you wanna be? Especially when the liabilities could be great, right? Any business has liabilities, right? And so you gotta think about, do I understand why that's there? And then how do I wanna do that to protect myself? Again, who cares if there's an FDA or auditors or a standard of anything? What do I need to do to protect my company and be successful? Because the goal of the company is to succeed and make money. Not in the wrong ways, not by cutting corners, by if I'm an ethical company and I'm gonna do the right thing and do no harm, then what would my quality system and all my business procedures and everything on how I operate the company, how should that look? Then I can go back and go, did I beat that line or at least meet it?
So this was around the time of Toyota's cars kind of driving themselves. So he said from in terms of like the recalls, how much it was gonna cost the company. I don't know, a couple $1 million or something like that of all the recalls that they had to do. What was the damage to their reputation and lost sales? So that's what he was trying to say, there's a way to actually quantify that reputation, but
yeah,
it's more important than the actual.
Yeah, and then often that gets ignored because it's hard to measure. I'm gonna talk about hard to measure in a second and why that excuse shouldn't hold. But I think we're getting the idea. Okay, all right. So there's Mr. Deming a little later in life, and another one of the quality gods, Sheward. So PDCA is based on them, the often called the Deming-Sheward cycle. Learn more of the history of that. So another one of the quality gods. So I got a lot of nodding heads when I asked people knew about PDCA, so I think you get it, right? Plan is what it sounds like. Quality planning has got to be integrated. It's not a separate check it off the list kind of thing. Oh yes, I have a plan, right? It's got to be broader. It's got to take into account a lot of different things rather than just I have this thing I'm trying to do and that's my plan. I have to see it in the context of other things going on in the company, right? Systems thinking extends beyond just the quality system. And all of that needs to be measurable, back to habit number 4. Right? If I'm just putting these vague qualifiers into my quality plan without any way to measure them, then I'm not going to know if I fulfilled the plan. Do. Okay. Sounds obvious. Follow the plan. Okay, there's more to it than just that. Do you have all the methods and tools identified and their uses understood, right? Do I have all the resources I need to actually do something? And is there additional validation that's going to be required? How do I know they're the right tools, resources, and so forth? Back to that question of the resources of human resources. How do I know that I have competent human resources? That doesn't mean they're just trained, they are competent. There's other elements to that. On the check side, okay, we're back to habit number 3, right? Don't just monitor, you have to make sure you know how you're going to analyze the data, which will tell you whether or not you've got the right data. And then watch for trends. Watch for what we used to know, right? It's always good to see where were we. Everybody knows Santayana's quote? Those who fail to remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Everybody know that one? Usually a pretty well known quote. Even if you didn't notice Santayana. It was not Tony Robbins. I don't know how many times. I love seeing that stuff on the internet when people put quotes into other people's mouths. Einstein gets a lot of it, followed by Deming. Tony Robbins gets punched.
Don't trust everything you read on the internet by Abraham Lincoln.
Yes, I actually did an article, a blog on our company website, and I used the picture of Abraham Lincoln about not trusting stuff you find on the internet. And I wondered if everybody even noticed the picture at the top of the article, right? But yeah, I have seen that posted and things like it. And then ACT, right, which is connected back and follow up. Plans are not etched in stone. They are expected to evolve. I see this happen a lot, particularly in the FDA area where I've had, I talk to companies and I look at like their design and development plans. And they're already done with the project and the plan is still at Rev A. And I'll ask about that going, didn't you learn anything as you went on? Yeah. Okay, why isn't the plan updated? Well, because when we updated the plan and FDA came in and looked at it, and they think we don't know how to do good planning. Okay, except FDA's own internal procedure tells their inspectors to be suspicious when the plan does not change over time. That means change was likely happening and not being recorded anywhere. They expect that you are not perfect at planning. There will be surprises, right? And so you need to build that in and then be ready to go, yes, we're going to take all this stuff we learned by checking on what we were doing, and we're going to feed that back in and update the plan and then continue the loop from there. All right, this is Mr. Duran. So he has 2 quotes in his quality handbook, one of his better known books. Okay. First one, the middle managers and the technical specialists must be bilingual. They must be able to talk to the bottom in the language of objects and to the top in the language of money. And then later in the same book, he says, quantify the size of the quality problem in language that will have an impact on upper management. The language of money improves communication between middle and upper managers. Management talks in dollars. So if you've ever been anywhere in an organization where you've got these attitudes where managers going, I don't think quality understands how to run a business. The quality system goes, management are idiots. They don't understand the importance of quality to the bottom line. That's where this is coming from, because they're talking, how many times have you ever been in a situation where quality is making a presentation and they're talking about inventory terms and first pass yields and cycle time, and management's going, so? Quality walks out going, what a bunch of idiots, they didn't understand any of it. Of course not, it wasn't in a language they could understand. You've got to turn it into the dollars, right? So you got to show them the money. Trying to explain things using any other means would just create, doubt about the chances for success. Cost of quality is your friend. You need to think about, right? What does it cost? Somebody talked about when we showed them that every recall costs us this, not just in terms of actual dollars, but in terms of reputation. I did one where I showed what is the cost of every audit finding to the organization, right? Which got me backing to redo the quality system. Because when they looked at it, they were stunned by how expensive it was to have audit findings. It was like hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, right? So think about that. And it's more about cost of poor quality, I could put in there, right? That's usually our cost of good quality is your investment to hopefully head off cost of poor quality. I used to work with I'm gonna put his picture up for a second, another consultant, and he was pretty harsh on us. And he would say basically, if you believe something can't be qualified, you're not done researching it. Actually, the way he said it was, if you think something can't be quantified, then you're declaring yourself as the be all end all expert in that topic. He challenged us and said, somewhere somebody's figured out how to measure this. Keep doing your research and find it. And his view was, there is nothing that can't be measured. And besides, this is a direct quote, anything you need to quantify can be measured in some way that's better than not measuring it at all. So don't give up on trying to quantify things. He was like, just try something, even a bad measurement is better than no measurement. Tom Gill, interesting guy, still alive, he's retired, but he still does a lot of posting. He's written a lot of books. The cool thing is, he's making them all available for free now. So look him up on LinkedIn, and go to his website and download everything he ever did. He's just decided, I'm done publishing. You can have it all. And he answers questions. You actually message him, he will respond. He's like, I don't know, 152 at this point. So very interesting guy, he's very sharp wit. He's got very unique views on things. He was well known in the software industry. He basically came up with the concept of software metrics. Before he came along, they didn't know that you could measure software. And he showed them how they could. But he's got a lot of other really cool things he's done. Continuing on this theme. All right, so what are we often asked to do as project managers? Present the project status to our management. How well does that usually go for those of us who have to do that? Usually perfectly clear to your management and they're satisfied with the information you're giving them. I've been a project manager, come on. I know, it doesn't go well often, more often than not, okay? What do we typically report on? Schedule and budget, okay? Only one of those actually speaks management's language. Which one? Budget, yeah. Schedule sort of does. Why? Time is money. Okay. Okay. But neither one tells you the complete picture. If I walked into my project status meeting and I tell management we're 2 weeks ahead of schedule, is the project in good shape?
What are you forgetting?
Yeah. If they're smart, they go, well, how much have you spent? How are you doing on the budget, right? It's relative. These two things are relative, but we have trouble explaining because one is in time and the other is in dollars. They like the one in dollars, they'd like to figure out the other one. You can actually put them both together. Has anybody got their PMP certification? Project Management Professional? Okay, one of the things in their body of knowledge is what's called the earned value method. Okay, which is trying to figure out, we did a bunch of work, what was it actually worth? Again, that difference between we got it done versus what was the result. That's what earned value is about. Great, you might have completed the work, but what did you get is what it amounts to, okay? So what you're looking at in the earned value method is comparing the planned and actual costs to the value of that work, all in dollars, which is what management likes, okay? So here's an example of a chart, okay, of different elements here. So again, the planned value is what did we estimate it was going to cost us to get this work done. The earned value is what was it worth when we got it done. Okay. And then from there, you can calculate your schedule variance is the difference between the earned value and the planned value. Ideally, your earned value should be at least equal to your planned value, right? Hopefully it's higher, that you got more out of it than what you thought it was going to cost you to do. And then cost variance, the other big variable, is the earned value minus the actual costs. So we got this value, but what did it cost us to get it? Let's take a look at some examples. So I've got a project and I was supposed to spend $5,000 on certain activity. I actually spent $10,000 and what I produced was worth $2,500. I think right away you start getting a feeling that's not good, okay? So let's do the calculations then. So our schedule variance is the earned value minus the actual expected cost for a minus 2.5 thousand, or 50% behind schedule is what that's saying. But I expressed it in dollars, okay? And my cost variance is the earned value minus the actual cost. I'm 300% over budget based on that. Now I understand where the project's at through 3 variables. You think your management would understand that better? Again, I just tried this out of the blue on my management. We had a VP, God, he would pick you apart. Right? We had this monthly project status meeting and everybody got up there and showed their budgets and schedules and then tried to explain why they were okay or not okay and how they were gonna get back on track. And I threw something like this up and he went, oh, okay, no questions. Everybody turned and looked at me and went, how'd you do that? How'd you get Larry not to ask any questions? That was like they were stunned, right? Because he got it. It was all in numbers he could understand. Let's look at another one. So we expected to pay to spend 5,000. We actually spent 4,000, and we got the 5,000 in value. So from a schedule variance, we were right on schedule. But from a cost perspective, we're also 20% under budget. How'd you like to deliver that to your management? To explain the status of the project. Yeah, so, and then you can aggregate this or look at it over time, which is what I started to do with this project. And so now you can see what's happening with this project as we see all those different variables, right? You can take a look at what's happening, the cost variance and the schedule variance. And we're saying, well, we're 25% over budget, but it was worse. I can show that now pretty clearly. So when I tell my management I'm getting control of this, I have numbers to back it up now. Not just my opinion. And I'm 14% behind schedule, but that's also getting better. So it's not wishful thinking when I tell them we're in better shape now than we were 2 months ago. It is progressing in the right direction. This is going to create much better credibility.
So it's earned value like the revenue it generated? Is that what that means?
You have to define what is the value, what is it going to be based on? That could be the trick, right? Is what do we mean by value? Sometimes it can be really simple, just if it's binary, it's just that if we produce this thing and it exists, we got the full value out of it. Otherwise, it could be something like, well, it was a product that it needed to produce certain revenue or certain profit margins, that's the value.
Labor reduction.
Yeah, could be, you know, so you have to decide what does value mean within the context of each project. But like I said, once you do boil it down to just the dollars, now you, like I said, you can track things, you can aggregate across multiple projects. So after I got buy-in from Larry on this, there were 3 other projects I was managing, and now I showed them all of them together. Each individual project is like this, and my projects in general are running like this. That was sort of me playing to my ego, showing I had good control of my projects. And I was sort of pinging my other fellow project managers going, let's see you guys show this. How do your projects? All right. There's more you can read. You can Google that. If you're part of long day. Name of the organization for Project Management Professional Society, right? No, PMI, Project Management Institute. You could buy their, what they call PMBOK, the Project Management Body of Knowledge, but you can also Google earned value management, and there's lots of good writing on there. I think it's even on Wikipedia. Look up. All right, we're down to habit 7. We're right about at the 2 o'clock mark, but we are wrapping up here. And I apologize, I just noticed the slide total was not on there. I'll fix that before we go. But We got like 3 slides of content and 2 thank you slides left. All right, so last thing, like I said, habit 7, right, under Covey, this was the sharpen the saw, right? Whatever you're learning, you've got to keep learning, okay? Quality is often been referred to as the accidental profession. How many of you came out of college and go, I want to get into quality? Did you really? You're the 3rd person I've ever met.
My mom told me I should, so I was like, great idea.
Oh, wait, was she in quality?
No.
Oh, okay, wow.
She's in pharma.
So in my 40-year career, you're the 3rd person I've met who actually set out to get into quality. No, that always amazes me. The rest of us fell into it in some way, right? I got into quality because in my IT time, I was part of the team that put the first, what amounts now to an EQMS system into Medtronic. And later, when the doc control manager retired and I wanted to be in management, I went, I'll take that. They went, oh yeah, you're the guy to put the system in place that they use. Go ahead, manage the department. I didn't know what a quality system was. I didn't know where doc control fit in. I learned all that from there. I had a really good mentor who was the director of quality systems. And that started me down this path. But yeah, we all tend to get there in weird ways. So the key is once you're there, it is an actual profession, okay? So don't be a hobbyist. If you're gonna be a quality professional, be a professional. I assume you all are because like you're at things like this, okay? When I mention books, I see people writing notes, right, or articles. Yes, you have to go do that stuff. There's science, there's mathematics. Be careful of all the anecdotal stuff that we normally learn from. And I always talk about when I got into Medtronic in 1991, I didn't actually get any formal training on the regs until 4 years later. How could I be in a medical device company for 4 years and have had no training on this thing we fear so much? I just relied on everybody said, they always said hush in case they're listening. We have to do it because might not like it. That was my learning, right? I learned everything. And then when I became an actual student of this stuff, found out all that anecdotal stuff, 80% of it was wrong. Okay. Everything changes. The thinking, the knowledge base. We're into what they now call quality 4.0. Okay, that implies there were 3 other versions, right, of the quality world before that. Right, so that means it is changing, and then the future 4.0 is kind of the next version of quality in the future. So again, back to Dr. Potter's quote, right? You've got to change your thinking. If you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to keep getting what you always got, kind of thing. If you're not prepared to evolve and innovate, or adapt and overcome, you're not going to be very effective, right? You're not going to be a good guerrilla leader. And again, don't be a hobbyist. Leaders know, rather than guess at things. So keep developing your skills. Don't forget the soft skills. Conflict management, good communication skills, good writing skills, that's part of communication. Right? All of that is as important as knowing how to do a process control chart, things like that. Right? All right, what do we have for questions? We're 1 minute after. I got one wrap-up slide and that'll be that. Anything online? Just to see if there's anything coming up. Oh, Documentation. Everybody know this movie?
Yes, The Office.
Yeah, I was just watching the other night. It's still hilarious. So
I'm a people person.
there we go. Yeah. All right. So key takeaways that we went into today. I'm never going to tell you what to do in your career, what risks to take, but for me, I've often found that asking for forgiveness rather than permission has worked pretty well. And if you do it right, then they won't ask you to apologize. They'll ask you to do it again and show somebody else how to do it. Again, people handle change better when it's subtle, right? The boiling water thing. Raise the temperature slowly versus plunging into the boiling water. Watch your measurements. It's easy to get the wrong information from your measurements. You don't understand what you're trying to measure and the methods by which you're going to get those measurements. And of course, that's a danger zone for making the quality department look bad. Well, see, they just disrupt everything and they want all this data and it doesn't tell them anything anyway. They're just a pain in the butt. Rethink your documentation. This is part of those communication skills as well. Get to the point. Think about who needs that information don't think about yourself. Don't think about the auditors. Okay? Think about the leaders and what you're trying to get them to do. And again, it's about what you do with your habits. And you got to make them habits, right? Operate consistently but differently, okay? And people will follow you and they will emulate. When I got my first management position, before I left my previous manager, all within the same company, I asked him any words of advice for a first-time manager. And it stuck with me today what he said. Because yeah, just remember, whatever you do is what your people will do. Because you're going to become a leader and they're going to follow you. Do the right things, they'll do the right things. Do the wrong things, they'll do the wrong things. All right, any follow-up last questions? Before we shut her all down? Masani, you're amazed, I'm only 4 minutes over schedule.
Yeah.
He knows from my class that they often go a lot further. Any other final questions, thoughts? No, we're good, we've had enough. Wanna move on? All right, well, I appreciate you all coming out. I know 4 hours is a lot of time to carve out of your days. So I do appreciate the time spent here. Again, if you want to get in touch with me or my company, my email is back on the slide about me. My company's general email is on there. You can follow us on LinkedIn. Feel free to, I know some of you already have sent me LinkedIn connection requests. So I absolutely will accept those. You'll be following me, but then follow QRx. We put a lot of really good stuff out there. My partner, Mark Swanson, has been in the industry for an equally long period of time. We put a lot of good stuff in. Here's a really cool thing about Mark. We've talked about the standards. Mark writes the standards, not by himself, but he's part of the team. He's working on the new version of ISO 9001. Gets on a plane tonight for Europe to work on ISO 9001. But he wrote 1345 and he wrote 14971. There's management standard. So we often get a lot of good stuff out. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your day. What remains of your summer, state fair, and all that good stuff. Thank you online, everybody who joined in.
Hey, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you.
Steve.
Yeah.
Before you, I know you said you're going to share the slides and the recording, and you also are going to send that example of that quality manual, that pamphlet or that trifold document as well.
Yeah, Karen Piper will send all that out, but I'll make sure she has a copy to provide that.
Great. Thank you. Great training.
All right.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's.